They circled my grandbabies' faces in red, and the money said they meant business. Before we start, let me know in the comments where you're watching my story from, so I can see how far it has reached. My name is Earl Carter, 68 years old, retired machinist out of Holly Bend, Alabama. I've got knees that predict rain better than any weatherman and a toolbox older than half the folks on my block. I don't scare easy. I've worked night shifts, buried a wife, kept a son from throwing his life away. But nothing ever punched the air from my lungs like what I saw at Jenkins Cleaners that evening. Tiana, my daughter-in-law, had pressed a slip into my palm that morning. "Daddy Earl, could you grab my camel wool coat for Mr. Jenkins? I'm slammed all day." Her voice had that soft, rushed sweetness folks use when they expect a favor they know you'll do. I said sure without thinking. I always do for family. Late sunlight stuck to the bricks on Oak Avenue as I walked up with a grocery tote tugging at my shoulder. Inside, steam rose from a press in the back, mixing with the clean sting of starch. Mr. Jenkins, small man with a snowy goatee and those wire frames he was forever pushing up his nose, stood behind the counter flipping a ledger with fingers that remembered every stain since 1985. I slid the yellow claim ticket over. He squinted, nodded, and went into the racks himself. Didn't send the teenager who usually fetched. He moved slower than usual, glancing at the door, the windows, the bell above the frame. When he returned, Tiana's coat lay wrapped neat in plastic, smelling like lavender and heat. Instead of handing it over, he scanned the empty shop. Then his hand closed around my forearm with a grip that belonged to a younger man. "Earl," he whispered, breath catching. "Step back here a minute." He pulled me behind the curtain to a cramped corner where the boiler ticked and shirts swung like sleepy ghosts. He reached under the counter and came up with a little zip bag. His fingers trembled. "I found this in your daughter-in-law's coat. You need to take your grandbabies and leave town before sunup." The words were so quiet I almost missed them, but my bones heard. In the bag was a wire transfer receipt, crisp and official-looking, stamped in red. The number on it didn't make sense, 6 zeros stacked like a dare. Tucked behind it was a 4x6 photo. Layla and Miles, my 7 and 4, on our front steps with chalk dust on their cheeks and crooked grins. Each face had been circled with a red marker. Not neat schoolhouse circles either. Angry, tight loops, like someone pressed too hard trying to claim them. My throat closed. The world drew down to that ugly red ink and my grandbaby's eyes. "What is this?" I asked, and my voice came out like gravel. Mr. Jenkins shook his head, fear making a shine on his forehead. "I don't know all of it, Earl, but I know bad when it brushes my hand. Folks don't hide that kind of money by accident. Folks don't mark babies that way if they mean them well. Please, I can't keep this here. Take it and go." Before dawn, he shoved the bag into my palm and pushed the wrapped coat toward me too. For a heartbeat, we just looked at each other. Two old men who'd traded jokes over buttons and hems for 3 decades, now bound by something rotten neither had asked to hold. I slid the bag deep into my jacket pocket till it burned against my ribs, thanked him without hearing my own voice, and walked out into a town that suddenly looked like a set someone would kick over. The grocery tote slipped. Tomatoes rolled and thumped against the curb. A bus hissed to a stop down the street. Somebody laughed. A boy on a bike sailed past. Everything sounded normal, disrespectfully normal, while Mr. Jenkins' words told behind my eyes. Before sunup, the sky thinned from gold to bruise as I got home. Our little brick house on Willow Lane has a porch swing my wife picked out, still creaking when the breeze hits it just right. Inside, the quiet had a weight to it. Marcus, my boy, was out of state for a job, hustling overtime to keep the lights steady. That left me and the kids. Tiana had texted earlier. "Late meetings. Please keep them, Daddy Earl. Back after 10. The messages always said back after 10 these days. 10 turned into midnight. Midnight turned into mornings that pretended not to know one another. I stood in the living room doorway and watched Layla and Miles build a castle out of blocks on the rug. Layla's hair was in 2 puffs tight as drum skins, her tongue peeking at the corner of her mouth as she balanced a roof. "Granddaddy, look, it got a porch like ours." Miles hummed to himself, clutching a plastic fire truck, sleepy eyes half moons. The red circles flashed behind my ribs. Those lines had not been curiosity. They were ownership. Once you've worked a lathe 30 years, you learn that hesitation takes fingers. I went to the bedroom, turned the lock, sat on the edge of the bed until the hammering in my chest found a rhythm, and called Miss Ruby. She's an old friend from Mount Sinai Baptist, a nurse with a mouth that had set a drunk straight, and an embrace that makes bad news blink. "Earl," she said, and I could hear the dinner dishes clinking in her sink. "I need a car and somebody discreet to drive it," I said. "Tonight. Long haul." Silence, just a breath, like she'd set the plates down and put both hands on the counter. "You in trouble?" "Not yet," I said, "but trouble's circling my porch." "No more talk," she said. "Lionel's on the late shift. He'll swing by in 20. Pack what you can carry." I hung up and moved. Bread into a bag. Cheese. The kids' favorite cookies. 2 water bottles. In the bedroom, I grabbed for the kids' drawers like a man bailing out a boat. Leggings and socks for Layla. Her purple hoodie with the glitter stars. Spider-Man pajamas and 2 t-shirts for Miles. Toothbrushes. Layla's ragdoll rose. Miles' superhero cape. Lord help me, yes, the cape. The house made those little house sounds that get loud when you're the only one listening. The fridge humming. The clock thudding. The porch swing whispering. I pulled the curtains. I didn't want neighbor eyes deciding to be friendly tonight. I went back to the living room and knelt by the kids. "Field trip," I said softly, painting calm over the crackle under my skin. "Nighttime adventure with Granddaddy. Put on your shoes." Layla blinked up at me, excitement fighting with bedtime sense. "Where?" "Where the donuts are hot no matter what time it is," I said, and her face broke open with trust. I hated that my lie had to borrow her trust to stand. Miles rubbed his eyes. "I sleepy." "You can sleep in the car, little man." I slipped a peppermint into his hand. He brightened like I'd handed him a birthday. We shuffled down the hallway. Every step felt loud. I buckled them into the backseat of Lionel's sedan, a clean old Crown Vic with a pine tree freshener and jazz murmuring low. "Evening, Mr. Carter," Lionel said, nodding. He had his mama's calm eyes. "Where we headed?" "The bus station." My voice didn't tremble. Not on the outside. He pulled away smooth. I watched our house shrink, porch swing stilled. You spend your whole life making a home, and one evening someone else's secrets turn it into a box of echoes. Holly Bend Station buzzed like a beehive no matter the hour. Neon flickered. Luggage wheels clattered. Teenagers laughed too loud, which would have annoyed me yesterday and comforted me now. A woman hawked hot links by the door. The spice sent dragging tears to my eyes I pretended were from the smoke. At the counter I said, 3 to Atlanta. Next departure." The agent glanced at the kids, at my hands, and printed tickets, without questions that might have made me break. "Gate 4. Leaves in 5. We hustled. Layla tucked Rose under her chin. Miles slumped against me, drifting. The bus sighed like a beast settling as we climbed aboard. I took the window seat and pressed the zip bag deeper into my jacket. The numbers on that paper felt like a horizon where bad men wait. As the bus groaned into motion, Holly Bend slid by. Mr. Tucker's barber pole, Tina's beauty spot, the hand-painted sign for Mount Sinai's revival this weekend. I saw Mr. Jenkins inside my mind, hand shaking, and made myself a promise I could keep. The next time I saw him, I'd bring him my mother's lemon bars and a thank you that didn't stutter. Miles' breath warmed my sleeve. Layla watched the dark outside like it might speak. I put a hand on each small knee. "Granddaddy," she whispered, "is Mommy meeting us?" The truth is a heavy thing to lift when little eyes hold out empty hands. "Mommy's working late," I said. "We're going to see an old friend of mine first. Pastor Elijah in Atlanta. He's got a playground by his church that puts our park to shame." She nodded, satisfied enough to let the wheels lull her. The miles unspooled. Billboards promised soft mattresses and harder liquor. The night turned from church quiet to interstate loud and back again. Dawn met us on the edge of Atlanta like a promise not to tell what it saw. The skyline tilted up, glass catching a shy sun. Lionel had pressed a card into my hand before we boarded. "Call if you need me, Mr. Carter." and I tucked it behind the transfer receipt like armor. We checked into a motel 2 blocks off Auburn Avenue, the kind where clean and cheap call a truce. The clerk eyed us over a crossword puzzle, took my cash, slid a key with a fat plastic fob. In the room, the AC rattled like an old drumline. I set the bag of snacks on the dresser, pulled the curtains tight, and locked both deadbolts. Layla curled on one double bed with Rose. Miles starfished on the other, Kate bunched under his cheek. I sat in the chair by the window and finally let my hands shake. I took the zip bag out, spread the contents on my knee. The receipt, the photo, the red circles that meant somebody had written my grandchildren's names on a list. I don't know how Tiana's coat carried this, or how long those shadows had walked in my house. I do know this. By nightfall, I'll be sitting in Reverend Elijah Brooks' office at New Hope Missionary, laying every piece on his desk. After that, Sister Aisha Monroe, she's a lawyer, fierce as a hornet with a smile soft as pound cake. We'll see what the law can do. And while grown folks do what they must, I'll do what I'm built for. Keep these children fed, warm, and so wrapped in love that evil has to squint to see them. I watch my grandbabies breathe, steady and sweet in the neon glow. The city stretched and woke beyond the glass. I folded the photo back into the bag and whispered into the thin motel air. Not today. Not mine. Not ever. I did 3 things before the city finished waking up. I prayed, I called, and I moved. By 7 a.m., Layla and Miles were buckled in the back of a rideshare headed for New Hope Missionary on Auburn, their breath fogging the windows, while they argued about whether superheroes ate pancakes or waffles. I kept looking over my shoulder like the road itself might grow eyes. The driver, a young brother with a Braves cap and the unbothered calm of someone who's seen Atlanta traffic, kept it smooth and said nothing. Bless him for that. Reverend Elijah Brooks met us under the brick archway, where hand-painted banners read "Feed the Hungry" / "Guard the Lambs." He's my age, maybe a year older, a tall man with a chest like an oak trunk and a voice the color of dark molasses. He didn't ask questions in front of the children. He just opened his arms. "You right on time, Earl." Sister Delilah got the kids' room set up. Sister Delilah appeared like she'd been summoned by prayer, keys jangling, smile warm as a stove in January. "Y'all come on," she said to the kids. "We got coloring, milk, and a rug even softer than your bed." That last part sold Miles. He shot me a look like, "Granddaddy, you hear that?" Layla squeezed my hand and searched my face with those big eyes that always see too much. "We close," I said. "I'll be just down the hall." When their small hands left mine, I felt the sudden cold of a man who's walked out of a sunny room into shadow. Reverend Brooks hugged me the way old soldiers clasp forearms. Then he took me to his office, book-lined, plant in the corner, a framed photo of him with Coretta Scott King from a march years back, and closed the door. "Tell me steady," he said. So I did. The coat, Mr. Jenkins' hand shaking, the zip bag, the red circles cutting my grandbabies' faces in two, the bus in the night. I slid the bag across his desk and let the ugliness sit there between us. He put on glasses, looked, and his jaw went hard. "This here is wickedness with a bank account." He tapped a wire receipt. "And this number ain't backyard money. This number got lawyers and front doors and rented men who don't blink. We gon' do this right." He picked up his phone. "Aisha, come home to church, baby. Bring your laptop." Aisha Monroe arrived like a front line running back, small but all drive, wearing a navy suit and sneakers, locks pulled into a low bun. She hugged Reverend Brooks first, then me like we were family she'd always had. "Mr. Carter, good to meet you. Reverend says you got something that smells like sulfur. Let's look." We spread the receipt on a legal pad. Aisha's fingers danced over her keyboard, eyes narrowing, mouth setting. "Routing number looks domestic. Beneficiary says Anson Holdings LLC." She sucked her teeth. "A shelf company registered in Delaware 3 months ago. Registered agent is a mail drop. That's like hiding your sins behind a choir robe." "What that mean for me?" I asked. "It means whoever moved this money's used to not being seen." She clicked again, opened a database I didn't recognize. "And here, there's a note. The origin account name is South Cross Logistics." That's a real company, but this specific sub-account was spun up last week and is already empty. Classic pass-through. She kept going. Authorized signatory, D. Holt. D as in what? Reverend Brooks asked. Darius, she said after another flurry of keys. Darius Holt. 43. Multiple aliases. Prior sealed cases for conspiracy and wire fraud. Ties to folks who move people like they boxes. The kind of man who buys his shirts pressed and his violence subcontracted. My stomach dipped like a car rolling over a dip you didn't see. Does Tiana know a Darius Holt? Aisha's eyes softened without getting any less sharp. We don't ask like that yet. We prove. Truth don't need guessing. It needs light. She glanced toward the hallway. And while we light it, those babies need to be nowhere near a place anybody might expect. Reverend Brooks nodded. We got a safe suite under the gym. Cots, kitchenette, emergency exit, camera on the door. We use it for women getting out of bad situations, folk whose luck ran out, till it can be mended. You sure? Pride is a useless code in a storm, but old men put it on without thinking. He put a hand on my shoulder. Brother, the Lord put roofs on churches for days like this. We moved the children mid-morning. The kids' room had already worked at small magic. Layla had 2 new crayons in her hair like barrettes, and Miles had a milk mustache he kept reapplying on purpose. Field trip part 2. I told them. Private fort. We took the service stairs down. The suite was exactly what Reverend said. Plain, clean, safe. Aisha set a tablet on the counter, logged into something that sprouted blue graphs like a heartbeat. Motion alerts, she said. Camera on the door. Nothing comes near without me hearing it sing. I microwaved oatmeal and sliced bananas. It felt good to do something ordinary, like laying down a rug between us and a cliff edge. After we ate, Sister Delilah appeared with a plastic tub of Legos and 2 blankets that smelled like sunshine. She must have seen the knot in my jaw. She patted my cheek like aunties do. Go handle business, Brother Earl. I got my eye on him. Back upstairs, the air felt thinner. Aisha had set up in the office like it was a war room. We're going to do 3 things, she said, pen tapping the legal pad. 1. Get a formal protective report on file without inviting a panic. I know the right folks, people who protect, not perform. 2. Secure any other evidence you got access to. Text threads, financials, devices. 3. Control the narrative. You answer nothing you don't want to answer. If Tiana calls, you don't bite the hook. As if the devil kept a schedule, my phone buzzed. Tiana. A selfie as the contact photo. Smiling. A version of her that used to make me hopeful for Marcus. Message. Where are you? Are the kids with you? My meeting ran late last night, and when I got home, Earl, this isn't funny. Aisha held up a hand. Don't respond. Not yet. She scribbled. What we say later is, the kids are safe with you out of town for a church event. Period. Nothing else. If she's clean, time will prove it. If she's not, time will smoke her out. Another buzz. Call me now. The caps hollered even though the room was quiet. I set the phone face down. My hands wanted to shake, but I told them to stand at attention. I turned to the Reverend. I need to tell Marcus. He's their daddy. You do, Aisha said. But we do it smart. His phone could be mirrored if she's sloppy or he's unlucky. We find a way that's yours alone. Lionel, I said. Ruby's brother. He runs a car at night, but he keeps a flip phone from 2009 like it's a pet. He's old school careful. Good, Aisha said. Use that. Meet him in person to borrow, for a call. No texts. Not yet. We split tasks. Reverend Brooks called a Captain Harris, the one who used to sit third pew with his mama, and set a private meeting for the afternoon. Aisha typed up an affidavit in plain language I could understand. Every sentence like a rung on a ladder. I made a list that started with toothpaste and ended with, don't forget you already love them enough. That last line steadied me more than any bullet point about batteries or cash. Before noon, the church kitchen turned out plates of fried catfish and coleslaw for the shelter crowd. I wasn't hungry, but I ate anyway because you can't think good on an empty stomach. Layla braided one of Sister Delilah's scarves into Rose's hair and told me very seriously that this was a disguise for spies. Miles built a lopsided car and insisted it could fly to the moon and also target. They were safe. That word took up a little more room in my chest than it had at dawn. At 1 o'clock, Lionel pulled his Crown Vic into the alley behind the church, where the dumpsters sit. He handed me that old flip like it was contraband. "Battery lasts a week," he said with a grin. "Ain't nobody tracking this but Jesus." I stepped into the shade, dialed Marcus' number for muscle memory. He picked up on the second ring, voice rough with work and worry. "Pop, what's—" "Listen close," I said. "The kids are with me. They're safe. We're in Atlanta at New Hope. Don't say a place out loud where you are. Don't text your address. Don't ask me why on this line. You take the long way home for a few days, and you don't let nobody and you didn't invite 6 months ago." He went quiet the way a man does when someone names the shape in his peripheral vision. "Is Tiana?" "Pop, what's happening?" "I'll tell you face to face," I said. "We'll set it up through Reverend Brooks. Bring only what you can throw in the back seat without thinking. You hear me?" A breath then. "I hear you." I snapped the phone shut, felt that ancient click like a door closing on a draft. When I came back inside, Aisha had a printout waiting. "I ran that photo's metadata," she said. "Whoever circled those faces scanned the image after marking it. The scan software embeds a timestamp and a machine ID. This one maps to a print shop on Candler Road. Guess who paid the shop last week on a corporate account?" "South Cross Logistics," I said, because even old dogs learn fast when the kids are on the line. "Exactly," she said. "We can get the shop video." "Quiet," cooperative ask from Captain Harris. Reverend Brooks returned from his call with a nod that said the world still had adults in it. "Harris will meet us at 2:30. No uniforms. Back office at the precinct on Decatur Street." I checked my watch like I had somewhere better to be. I didn't. Where I needed to be was exactly where I stood, between my family and a thing that bought red markers by the case. We went downstairs one more time before we left. Layla had taught Miles how to draw a house with a triangle roof, a square door, 2 windows with curtains. She put a big sun in the corner with tired rays. "That's us," she said, tapping the door with the crayon tip. "It's our safe house." "Our safe house," I repeated, and the words fit. I kissed their foreheads, told Sister Delilah we'd be back by supper, and followed Aisha and the Reverend up into the afternoon. By the time we stepped out into the heat, the part of me that shakes had decided to sit down and let the part that acts do the walking. We had a name, Darius Holt. We had a company, South Cross Logistics. We had a shelter and allies who answered the phone. And we had a simple plan you could write on a napkin. Protect, collect, tell it true. There's a lot in this world I can't do anymore. Run sprints, carry a washing machine up 2 flights, see a dang thing without my readers. But I can stand. So I did. And with every step toward Captain Harris's office, the ground felt a little more like it belonged to us again. Captain Harris didn't wear his rank so much as he carried it. Like a tool he knew when to use and when to leave in the box. He met us at the side door of the precinct on Decatur Street in a short-sleeve white shirt, tie a shade crooked like a man who'd been working since dawn, badge clipped to his belt, eyes that said he'd seen worse and still believed in better. "Reverend, Ms. Monroe, Mr. Carter," he said, giving me the kind of handshake that measures a man without trying to. "Let's keep this quiet and clean." We slid into a back office with blinds half closed and a coffee maker that had done too much service. Aisha spread the wire receipt, the photo, and her printouts like she was laying down cards nobody else at the table knew existed. Harris read fast, lips pressing together around the number of zeros, then lifted the photo and looked at the circles longer than I could stand to. "Who else seen this?" he asked. "Just us and Mr. Jenkins at the cleaners," I said. "He's the one who found it in Tiana's coat." Saying her name in that room felt like tossing a match toward a dry field. Harris nodded, eyes never leaving mine. "You did right, coming here instead of lighting up phones. If this ties to South Cross Logistics and to Darius Holt, we're not talking about fools. We're talking about professionals who pay other folks to risk prison for them. Aisha clicked her pen. First stop is a print shop on Candler Road. The photo was scanned there last week, 1:19 p.m., based on the embedded metadata. Corporate payment from South Cross. We need video, receipts, work orders, point-of-sale logs. Polite ask first. If they blink, we'll draft an exigent request under protective circumstances. Harris looked at me. You coming? I am, I said. Not to play hero. To remember faces. He gave a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. All right then. Move quiet. We took his unmarked sedan, an old Taurus that still smelled like the day it rolled off the lot, to the print shop, a strip mall storefront between a pawn shop and a hair braiding salon. The bell jingled as we stepped in. Warm plastic and toner hung in the air. A chime from the back said a print job had finished. Behind the counter, a young woman with a pink head wrap and long lashes looked up from her phone. Afternoon, Harris said, tone easy but official. He slid a business card onto the counter and kept his hand on it, so it didn't become a souvenir. Captain Harris, we need to talk with whoever handles your scanning station and payments. Her eyebrows jumped at Captain. She called to the back. Uncle Mel. Uncle Mel rolled out from the print room on a stool like a ship's captain leaving the bridge. Heavy set, salt and pepper beard, t-shirt that read eat, sleep, print, repeat. He clocked the badge, then our faces, then the seriousness in the room, and gave a slow nod. Let's not spook customers. Come on through. We stood among paper towers and humming machines, while Harris explained they were assisting with the protective matter involving children. Aisha added just enough to make cooperation sound both noble and practical. Uncle Mel didn't argue. I got 2 daughters and a grandson, he said. Say no more. He keyed into the network scanner logs. You said last Thursday, 1:19 p.m.? Station 2. Aisha gave him the transaction ID from the metadata. His fingers moved, and the screen pulled up a list, timestamps, file sizes, thumbnail previews. He clicked one, and there it was on the monitor. My grandbaby's faces, red circled. Uncle Mel swore under his breath. Who would? He didn't finish. He clicked again and pulled the store's cameras, 4 angles, synced. He split the screen, so Station 2 sat in the corner like a stage. At 1:12 p.m., a woman walked in. Sunglasses, ball cap low, wig a shade too glossy, mask still hanging despite the heat. She moved like she'd practiced, not being watched, and wasn't good at it. She glanced at the ceiling camera, recalibrated, and kept her face turned 3/4 away. But bodies talk whether we let them or not. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the little hitch in her left shoulder where she carried a bag heavy on that side. Layla does that tuck. Tiana does, too. My mouth went dry. Can you zoom? Uncle Mel did, but pixels have limits. The woman held a photo up to Station 2's glass, pressed it flat, scanned, checked the screen, fiddled with the crop like she wanted the circles to show, then saved. She paid with a business visa. Aisha read out the last 4 digits from the log that matched her database, and left. Receipt? Aisha asked. Uncle Mel printed it. Company name, South Cross Logistics, LLC. Authorized signatory on file, D. Holt. Customer signature on the counterpad was a nonsense scrawl. Harris took photos with his department phone, then asked for copies. Uncle Mel burned the footage onto a thumb drive without being asked. You didn't get this from me, he said, then corrected himself. You did, but you didn't. Outside, the heat felt different, like truth has a temperature. Harris turned to me. You think that's Tiana? I told the truth I could stand. I think it's a woman who studied my house long enough to hold a picture of my babies without shaking. I swallowed, forced my shoulders down, but I won't swear my soul on a hat brim and a wig. Aisha put a hand up, the stop sign of a mind that loves evidence. We don't anchor on the mask. We triangulate. If she paid on a corporate card, the shop's terminal pushed tokenized data through the processor. That gives us a merchant category, transaction time, and authorization path. If we pull South Cross internal logs, We can't pull squat from a private company without a court order, Harris said, not unkindly. But we can ask the right questions through the right person. I know someone inside that industry, compliance manager at a payment processor, and we can time-match cell pings to the tower out front if we have target numbers. We didn't, not yet, but we had something to name. 3 names, really. Darius Holt, South Cross Logistics, and whoever wore that wig at 1:19 p.m. Harris drove us to a city office where paperwork goes to wear a tie. He drafted an exigent request to preserve video and transaction logs at the print shop and notified a prosecutor he trusted that a protective case involving children might grow teeth. Aisha wrote while he talked, turning his words into filings that would stand up when sunlight hit them. I signed where she pointed. You're the complainant and the guardian, she said. Your signature buys time for the courts to catch up. We grabbed bottled water in the lobby. My hands had steadied into something more useful than tremble. An old machine warmed up. Next is eyes on South Cross, Aisha said. We don't walk in. We don't show our faces. We learn the pattern around their warehouse. Warehouse? I asked. They lease a distribution space off Moreland, she said, handing me a printout from a commercial registry. Unit 7B. Listed as last mile coordination. No signage. Harris frowned. That corridor's a conveyor belt. Legit deliveries, shady ones, too. If Holt's smart, he keeps his name off the lease and his hands off the cardboard. Aisha looked at me. You don't come on this one. I wasn't planning to. My job's with the children until you say otherwise. She nodded, liking that answer. Good. Before we split, I asked Harris the question that had been crouching behind my teeth all day. Can you put anything on airports and bus stations? Not like on the news, just a net nobody sees. He considered. We can flag the children's names for travel verification. No fly without parental presentment. Secondary screening for similar names. A soft alert at Greyhound and Amtrak if those tickets pop. It won't catch everything, but it makes dumb plans harder. Do it, I said. Back at New Hope, the gym echoed with a youth basketball scrimmage. The bounce and squeak and holler did an old man's heart good. We slipped down the service stairs. Layla sat cross-legged, teaching Miles how to write his name on a big sheet pad. His M looked like mountains, his I like a tired pole, his L like courage learning to stand. Granddaddy. Layla smiled like the sun had finally come where it meant to be. Sister Delilah says we can have movie night on the projector if we pick something with no nightmares. No nightmares, I said. We've had enough. I gave them apples and peanut butter and listened to their tiny gripes about how apples should taste like candy if they want to be popular. Then I left them with Sister Delilah and her watchful joy. Upstairs, Aisha laid out the plan like a recipe so simple a man could cook it without burning the house down. Harris would deliver the preservation requests and quiet alerts. Aisha would draft motions for limited subpoenas as soon as a judge could be reached. She and Harris would take a look at Unit 7B from a car 2 blocks off, staying long enough to log plate numbers and patterns, not long enough to become the pattern. I would stay with the kids, call Marcus back through Lionel's flip, and set a meeting at the church after dark, when the building's comings and goings look like a choir rehearsal. While we're out, Aisha said, if Tiana texts again, you still don't engage. At 8 p.m., you can send one message. Kids safe with me at church retreat. We'll talk tomorrow. Nothing else. Seems cold, I said. Seems wise, she said. At 5, Lionel brought me a sack of hot wings and green beans like he knew my blood needed salt and my soul needed home food. I called Marcus from the flip. We picked a time. 9 p.m., back entry, Reverend's office. No one else. He said, Pop, I'm holding it together because you told me to. And I believed him because I taught him how. Evening came. The gym quieted. The church took on that hush buildings get when they're tired and satisfied. Aisha texted from an encrypted app one didn't know existed. Saw 7B. 2 vans. Unmarked. Driver transferred crates to a black SUV with a temp tag. Plate frame. Go Dogs. We have the temp number. No signatures on the door. Holt didn't show. Harris, preservation in place. Processor contact believes South Cross has a merchant profile flagged for irregular activity. He'll get us an internal memo when we have paper. I set the phone down and went to tuck in my grandbabies. Layla wanted 2 blankets and a story about a river that didn't know it was a road yet. Miles asked if superheroes ever took naps. The good ones do, I said, and he was asleep before I finished. When I came back upstairs, the Reverend stood in the hallway, hands in his pockets, face soft with a kind of tired victory. "Step by step," he said. "Step by step," I echoed. There was no trumpet sound, no headline, just a church that smelled like lemon cleaner and hope, a lawyer with a laptop cooling on her knees, a captain writing notes in block letters, and a grandfather with his palms open, ready for whatever God put in them next. The world hadn't been fixed, but the ground under our feet felt less borrowed, and for the first time since Mr. Jenkins pressed that bag into my hand, I slept in a chair and did not dream about red ink. They didn't just circle my grandbabies, they penciled the delivery date. Marcus came through the church's back entry at 9:03 p.m., cap pulled low, shoulders set like a man bracing for weather. Reverend Brooks cracked the door after one soft knock, and I watched my son cross the threshold. Same long stride I used to have, same squint that says he's measuring damage and cost in the same breath. We hugged with both arms and our backs, the way men do when words can't carry the load. "You good?" I asked. "I'm upright," he said. "Where are they?" "Downstairs with Sister Delilah. Oatmeal, cartoons, blanket fort. They're all right." Some of the glass in his eyes cleared. He nodded once and sat. Aisha rose from the sofa, introduced herself, and shook his hand like a colleague, not a client. Captain Harris leaned against the file cabinet, legal pad under his forearm, reading the room like a map. I took out the zip bag and laid the contents on the Reverend's desk. No build-up, no softening. The wire receipt with its drowning number. The photo, those red rings that stole sleep. Marcus didn't touch either. He bent toward them like they might bite. "Pop," he said, voice low and ragged. "Tell me this is something else." I don't know." "It's exactly what it looks like," I said. "Found in Tiana's code at the cleaners." Mr. Jenkins pulled me aside and put it in my hand. I wished to God it was a bad dream. He pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose and breathed until his chest remembered how. "I thought I was crazy," he said at last. "Late nights. Phone face down. Cash I didn't count missing from my strongbox. She always had a reason that sounded right if you wanted it to. I wanted it to." Aisha slid a page toward him. "We've connected the payment to a shell company tied to a man named Darius Holt. The photo was scanned at a print shop on Candler Road. Corporate card. We have video of a woman masking her face and scanning this exact image. We're not speculating, we're establishing." Harris added, "We've put quiet flags on travel. We're walking up to a judge for preservation orders and limited subpoenas. We don't scare this snake. We pin it." Marcus looked at me then, straight on. "You did right taking them." "I did what I could carry," I said. "Now we do more." He nodded, a decision forming. "What do you need from me?" "Devices," Aisha said. "If there's a laptop, tablet, or secondary phone Tiana uses, bring it. We can image data without powering them on if we're careful. We want her messages before she wipes them." "She's got a tablet she says is for Pinterest and recipes," Marcus said, a bitter edge cutting the words. "Keeps it in the shallow drawer by the stove with the potholders. There's a little phone. She didn't know I saw, too. She hides it in the laundry room, in the powder detergent box. It's got a crack on the top right." He shut his eyes. Thought I was being paranoid seeing a second charger plugged in behind the dryer. "We get those," Harris said. "We get inside the room where they talk." I put a hand on my son's shoulder. "You can't go alone." "I'll go," Lionel said from the doorway. He had ghosted in on soft feet, as if the church itself had sent him. "Cars out back. I know the neighborhood. I know how to look like a man who don't see nothing." Harris looked to Aisha. She looked to me. I looked to Marcus. He set his jaw. "Let's move," he said. We drew a plan so simple it couldn't tangle. Marcus would let us in with his key. Lionel would idle 2 houses down. ready to roll at the first hair standing up. We would not linger. Drawers, device out. No notes on the table. No lights that didn't need flipping. If Tiana was home, we'd wave at a neighbor's cat and keep walking. Time limit? Marcus asked. For minutes, Aisha said. If we're there longer than a commercial break, we made a mistake. I wanted to go, but I knew where my weight belonged. I'll stay with the kids, I said to the Reverend. Sister Delilah may need an extra voice for bedtime. Go on, Reverend told the others. I'll pray with my eyes open. They left in a line. Harris, Aisha, Marcus, Lionel, slipping into the warm dark of the alley like good trouble. I went downstairs. Layla had made a crown out of paper and tape. She put it on my head and declared me king of snacks. Miles demanded a parade. We marched around 2 cots and a bin of stuffed animals, with all the ceremony a tiny kingdom requires. Then I tucked them under blankets, humming a hymn my wife used to sing, and sat with the glow of the tablet Aisha had set to the door camera. 2 figures crossed now and then, a deacon, a janitor, ordinary as breath. At 9:47, my phone buzzed once with Aisha's coded text. Knock knock. That meant entry. At 9:50, laundry. At 9:51, stove. At 9:52, out. I let my shoulders sink an inch. Upstairs, the Reverend and I met them as they came back through the side door with the air of men who'd outrun a dog by walking. Lionel set a freezer bag on the desk, 1 small, cheap phone with that cracked corner, 1 tablet with fingerprints in a pattern that said hurry and guilt. Marcus' hand shook. He jammed them in his pockets. She wasn't there, he said, voice calm by force. There was a smell like somebody had come and gone too quick. I didn't look like a detective. I looked like a tired husband getting his mail. Good, Aisha said. She took out a kit, gloves, Faraday sleeves, a cable that looked like it belonged in a spaceship. We don't power anything on yet. We isolate the radios. We clone. We preserve the order of bits like we're handling bone china. She slid both devices into those silver sleeves that make thieves and signals give up. Then she worked by the light of her laptop, fingers sure. Harris filled out a chain of custody form with block letters and gave Marcus a copy. A judge will see you weren't a burglar, he said dryly. You retrieved property in the interest of your children's safety. It took 20 minutes, maybe 25. Aisha's mouth tilted when she saw what she needed. There's a cloud backup configured, she said. Whoever set this up thought deleting a message made it die. It just moved address. We're pulling nightly syncs. Harris leaned over. You seeing names? Handles, she said. A lot of initials. DH appears in a thread saved as cousin. There's a pinned note that says deliverables, followed by dates. Next to one date, today's date, there's a green check. Next to Friday, there's an airplane emoji. She went still. Attached, a PDF with 3 QR codes that look like boarding passes. Marcus swallowed hard enough that the room heard it. Names. Aisha clicked. The names on the file are placeholders, random strings. But the PNR locator codes are real formats. We can send these to the airline security liaison through Harris's channel. Ask for the name records. They won't print Tiana's face on the wall for us, but they'll confirm whether minors were attached to these bookings. Harris was already dialing. Sims. Harris. Quiet favor. 3 PNRs coming your way. I need passenger names and any redress notes. He listened. I'll owe you pound cake at Thanksgiving. He hung up and grunted. He's good. What else? I asked, because the floor felt tilted and I needed rails. Aisha scrolled. Chats with an account saved as Stacy, PDA. That aren't about cupcakes. Venmo-like transfers in small amounts from a half-dozen new contacts. A folder of photos of school pickup lines, time-stamped, geotagged. She clicked one and frowned. And a note labeled Jenkins with an address and hours. Mr. Jenkins? I said, blood climbing quick. The cleaners. She nodded, eyes narrowing. Looks like he wasn't a random discovery to them. He was a variable they intended to control. There's a draft message to DH that says, Old man at shop is chatty. Handle. Marcus stood so fast his chair squealed. Handle? You mean hurt? Harris's voice went foam hard. It means scare, buy, or break. He pointed at the ceiling. I'll put a car on Jenkins tonight. No lights, no parade. Just insurance. He texted while he talked. Men who know the clock never let their thumbs rest. Then he answered a call on the second ring, listened, and gave us a nod. Airline confirms one of those PNRs is for Friday. 3 seats, 2 marked as children, 1 adult. Payment is a corporate card ending in the same digits we saw at the print shop. Names are masked because the booking used custom field tags that will require a formal request to unmask. Sims says the adult's date of birth listed doesn't match Tiana's. Could be falsified. Friday. I repeated, feeling the words settle like a stone in a jar. They put a day on my babies. Not anymore, Aisha said. She wrote a line on her pad and underlined it twice. Tonight we secure Jenkins. Tomorrow first thing judge. Then knock on Darius Holt's fronts with paper and light. We don't wait for Friday to come to us. Marcus rubbed a palm over his jaw. Do I call Tiana? You send one message, Aisha said, steady as a metronome. What we drafted. Kids are safe with me at a church retreat. We'll talk tomorrow. No bait. No details. No fight. He typed it. His thumb hovered. He glanced at me. I nodded. He hit send and set the phone down like it might bite him. Reverend Brooks bowed his head, not for show. Lord, give us steady hands, he said simply, and make our feet faster than evil's. We broke like a team that understands its play. Harris stepped out to coordinate Jenkins' quiet guard. Aisha packed the cloned images into an encrypted drive and sealed the originals. Marcus asked if he could see the kids, and I took him down to the safe room. Layla stirred when he kissed her forehead, smiled without waking. Miles mumbled, Daddy make waffles, because promises are how small hearts keep time. Back upstairs, the church had shifted into that slow hum buildings get after midnight. Air vents humming, exit signs winking green. I poured coffee that tasted like the end of a shift and took it black. The truth was ugly. The timeline was clear. The circle on the calendar had a name, Friday. But so did our circle. Earl and Marcus, Aisha and Harris, Reverend Brooks, Sister Delilah, Lionel, Mr. Jenkins, and 2 sleeping children who thought a projector movie was the height of luxury. I put the crown Layla made on the corner of the desk. King of snacks. It read in marker, letters uneven and brave. Crowns like that aren't ornaments, they're vows. I straightened it and got ready for morning. Morning didn't bring peace. It brought paperwork and proof. Captain Harris texted at 6:11 a.m. Car sat across from Jenkins 2 to 4 a.m. dark sedan. 1 male. Hoodie never got out. Marked unit drifted past twice. Sedan peeled. Plate covered. I thanked him and woke slow. The old bones protesting until my mind reminded them we had a schedule God himself could read. By 7, Sister Delilah had the kids crunching cornflakes and arguing over whether bananas counted as soggy. If you ate fast. I kissed their heads, told them I'd be upstairs, and climbed to Reverend Brooks' office, where Aisha had set up a small courthouse on the coffee table, affidavits, exhibits, a drive with cloned devices, and a list titled ASKS. We're going to Judge Whitaker, she said, smoothing a page like it was a shirt before Sunday service. She's careful, not scared. We'll request 1. Emergency protective order for Layla and Miles. 2. Preservation and production from the airline on those PNRs. 3. Limited business records from Southcross. Authorized user logs for the corporate card. 4. Geofence data for the print shop between 1:10 to 1:30 p.m. last Thursday. 5. Covert camera warrants for Unit 7BS exterior. And 6. A ping for a number we hope to pull from Tiana's device image. What about Mr. Jenkins? I asked. Harris already put him on a quiet watch, she said. But I'd like eyes on and gratitude delivered in person. Men like him do brave things alone. We should not leave him alone. We divided like a good choir, each voice where it belonged. Aisha and Harris took the stack and the unmarked Taurus toward the courthouse. I drove with Reverend to Jenkins Cleaners, with a box of Sister Delilah cinnamon coffee cake, still warm enough to fog the lid. Mr. Jenkins had slept at the shop. You could see it on him. Stubble he usually shaved, a sweater over his shirt though the steamer threw heat. When the bell chimed and he saw me, he let out a breath I don't think he knew he'd been saving. "Earl," he said, eyes going wet quick. "You all right?" "I am because you are," I said. I set the cake on the counter and took his hands over it. "We put a shadow on your door last night. Somebody came sniffing but left hungry." His gaze flicked to the window. I noticed the same car twice. Didn't think doubles enough to be sure. I'm an old man. I don't sleep deep anymore. He swallowed. "I shouldn't have looked in that pocket." "You should have," I said. "God picked you for it." I pulled a chair from a seamstress station and Saturday. Tell me again, slow. "The day you found it. Who dropped the coat? What did you see, smell here?" He nodded and let the details roll like thread. "A woman brought the coat. Cab mask. Said it was her sister's. Paid in cash. Voice trained low, like a singer trying to sing down a register she didn't own. When I tagged the coat, I noticed a run stitch on the pocket, done in a rush. When I pressed and the steam softened the lining, that stitch puffed up. I hate a pocket pucker. Makes a good coat look cheap. So I opened it to fix. That bag slid out. The smell with it, jasmine and something sharp like new plastic." "Anything on her hands?" Reverend asked. "A small scar by the right thumb," he said. "And she kept tucking hair that wasn't hers. Wig line too far forward. She signed the ticket as Stacy." He grimaced. "I don't think that's her name." "Neither do we," I said. I folded him into a hug. "We're going to relocate you for a few days. Church has a suite. You'll be fed, and folks will argue about whether you need a sweater. It'll be the safest argument in town." He started to protest, then looked at the front door and sighed. "Let me close early like the power went out." Back at New Hope, we tucked Jenkins into the spare room like he was a deacon with a cold. Sister Delilah set tea next to his bed and told him the secret to staying young was keeping people's business out of your blood pressure. He laughed, which took 10 years off his face. At 10, Aisha called from the courthouse parking lot. "We got it, Earl." Whitaker signed the lot. Protective order for the kids, emergency subpoenas, geofence, and camera warrants. "We're live." I said a thank you that sounded like a hymn and hustled upstairs. Harris was already on 2 phones, airline liaison on one, a tech unit on the other, lining up the dominoes. Aisha slid an order across to me. "This authorizes the children's school to release records directly to me and Captain Harris. Not because we need report cards. We need pickup lists, incident reports, any notes about new, authorized adults added." I called the school, told Ms. Hanley, soft voice, steel spine, that a lawyer would be in touch with papers to collect records for Layla Carter and Miles Carter. Ms. Hanley listened and said, "We thought something felt off last week. A woman we didn't know tried to pick Miles up early. Said she was a cousin. We called Tiana, and she approved it by phone. But we didn't release him because she wasn't on the list, and your son Marcus is the primary." Tiana got real snippy. We stuck to the rules. I squeezed the bridge of my nose until my eyes watered. "Ms. Hanley, you saved my grandbaby without knowing you were catching a bullet." "We'll do it again," she said. "Bring the papers." By noon, responses started to land like rain that knows the crops are thirsty. The airline confirmed the PNRs, attached names. The adult listed as Lydia Parrish. DOB that slid a decade off Tiana, like a mask. The children filed under initials that matched none of ours. Payment, corporate card ending the digits we already knew, billing address. A suite number that belonged to a mailbox store in Buckhead. Aisha's eyebrows climbed when Harris flashed the email. "Parrish is an alias Holt uses for women in his orbit," she said. "We've seen that surname pop up on leases tied to his fronts." She spun her laptop and showed a table. Shell companies, managers, addresses, all braided into a net that catches money and drops people. Tech unit texted a geofence result from the print shop window for devices present that weren't regular customers. One ping matched to a prepaid phone activated 2 days before, now dark. One matched South Cross office Wi-Fi earlier that morning. One hit a tower by a gas station 3 blocks away at 1:27 p.m. We pulled that station's camera with the warrant. The video showed the same ball cap and wig by the pumps, fingers with a right thumb scar, peeling a mask to sip a soda. The angle caught only half a face, but half of a face can tell on the whole when you've shared a dinner table. I felt the floor lean. I put my hand on the desk until it flattened. "We still don't anchor on emotions," Aisha said, gentle but firm. "We stack the showing." She was right. Feelings lie. Paper doesn't. With Judge Whitaker's order, Harris installed a covert camera pointed at Unit 7B's roll-up door. No inside view, just the dance of arrivals. At 2:30, a white box truck eased up, back to the dock, and a man with forearms like hams rolled out 2 pallets, shrink-wrapped in brown. Another man, thinner, wore a ball cap with Savannah on it and a sweatshirt in weather that didn't ask for one. He checked a clipboard, waved, and the boxes slid inside. 10 minutes later, a black SUV with a temp tag and a Go Dogs plate frame rolled up. The thin man wheeled one pallet back out, no labels visible, into the SUV's open rear after the seats had been folded flat. Sloppy for a legit warehouse, too careful for an honest mistake. Harris took stills of plates and faces and sent them through the slow grinder where good cases grow teeth. At 3, Ms. Hanley's records arrived by courier. Aisha flipped through and tapped a form. Amendment to authorize pickups signed last Tuesday, adding Stacy Parrish, cousin. She held it up. The signature tried to be neat and failed in the same direction as the scrawl at the print shop. "Who signed in the office?" I asked. "Front desk initial is SD," Aisha said. "Sharon Davis. We'll get her to describe the ID she saw. If it's a high-quality fake, we can trace the maker. If it's cheap, we can trace the buyer." Around 4, the payment processor compliance contact sent a memo. South Cross's corporate card had triggered internal flags for atypical merchant categories. In the last 10 days, it had paid for printing services, luggage, a one-night airport hotel reservation, and a family portrait studio visit in a mall 2 counties over. The name on the portrait studio reservation, Parrish/Carter. That last word hit me sideways. I tasted metal. "Portrait studio?" Harris said. "Why?" "Documentation," Aisha answered, jaw tight. "When traffickers move children, they sometimes create faux family paperwork, photos, school records, doctor notes, to grease the wheels at airports and borders. If those studio prints match the children, they'd use them to argue kinship at a checkpoint." I stood up because sitting felt like surrender. "Then we take that studio first. We take the file. We tell them what they helped build and make sure they never build it again." Harris was already nodding. "Mall's 20 minutes. We go quiet. We don't scare. We collect." "I'm going," I said. Aisha considered me. "You can come to identify, but we keep you in the pocket." "I'll be a shadow," I promised. We left the church like a small storm. Lionel drove, because a steady wheel is a weapon. The portrait studio smelled like powder and plastic smiles. A young man with a name tag reading Tariq perked up when he saw a captain, a lawyer, and an old man with a stare that trims hedges. Harris kept it low. "Protective matter. We need yesterday's files for a booking, Parrish/Carter. Orders to preserve and produce. You won't be in trouble if you don't argue." Tariq's eyes went wide but not stupid. "We keep files 7 days," he said, fingers already tapping. "We don't ask for birth certificates. We just make folks look like they got along since kindergarten." He clicked. "Here." On the screen, a woman in a wig I'd come to hate, standing with 2 kids who looked like mine in height and tilt but weren't, neighbors, maybe, or models. The file names included lighting presets and proof_14. Then another folder. Finals. My breath stopped. The faces in those finals were my grandchildren. Layla's brave smile, Miles' suspicious one, cropped and layered over the posed bodies, so well a hurried clerk might not notice. Somebody had stolen their faces off social media or school emails and stapled them to strangers' frames. Tariq stepped back, hand over his mouth. Man, I didn't. We don't. They paid cash. $40 extra for rush edits. I thought it was catfish stuff. Like someone trying to impress a boyfriend. We're not here to ruin you, Aisha said, soft as she could manage. We're here to stop this. Make the files. Erase your local copies after. Don't speak on this to anyone but Captain Harris. He nodded so hard his tag jumped. We walked out with a drive that felt heavier than metal. In the parking lot, Atlanta heat pressed on our shoulders. Harris checked his watch. We're going to frame this in front of a prosecutor tonight, he said. In the morning, we asked Whitaker for a search warrant on Unit 7 be based on cumulative indications, corporate card trail, camera patterns, studio fraud, travel bookings, and device data. And we moved the children again, Aisha added. Not because the church isn't safe. Because safe is a moving target. I'll call a partner shelter in Decatur. No signage, different side of town. Back at New Hope, I told Layla and Miles we were having a sleepover field trip. Layla asked if the new place had a projector. I told her I'd bring one if it didn't. Miles asked if heroes got tired. The good ones do, I said again, and this time I meant me. As night slid down, we loaded the Crown Vic with blankets and the kids' crown and cape. Jenkins hugged me like I'd brought him his daughter back from college. Reverend Brooks laid a hand on my shoulder and said, "The Lord loves a plan stitched with courage." Aisha checked her list. Harris checked his pistol, not for threat, for ritual, and nodded to me like we'd spent our lives on the same line. We weren't done, not by a span, but we weren't guessing anymore. We had dates, places, receipts, and names that would have to answer when the door was knocked at dawn. I buckled my grandbabies in, looked at their faces in the rear view, and felt a simple, stubborn truth settle over the noise. They tried to chart my family's future in red ink. I brought a pen of my own. We moved like a family that had practiced fire drills. By 8:30, the kids were buckled with their blankets and snacks. Jenkins had his sweater and his tea thermos, and Lionel eased us toward Decatur with the kind of unremarkable driving that keeps angels from breaking a sweat. The safe house looked like any other two-story on a quiet street. No signage, just a porch light shaped like a shepherd's hook. Sister Ruth, a silver-haired woman with forearms like work and eyes like Sunday, opened the door before we knocked. "Come on in," she said. "Rooms are ready. We wash worries, not just sheets." Layla found the beanbag in the little den and declared it hers. Miles discovered a basket of toy cars and had them cruising the baseboards in under a minute. I made their beds. We said our little ritual. God is near. We are loved. We are safe. And I watched them fall asleep the way kids do when they believe you can carry the whole sky. At 10, Aisha and Harris peeled off for the DA's office to lay the stack in front of a prosecutor who didn't need a headline to do his job. I sat at Sister Ruth's small kitchen table, the kind where bills get paid and birthdays get planned, and nursed coffee while Lionel updated Ruby by text in letters like bricks. Jenkins nodded off in an armchair with a quilt over his knees and the night's fear finally leaking out of his face. My phone buzzed. Tiana again. "Tiana. Earl, this is cruel. Answer me. Where are my children?" I typed the line Aisha had rehearsed into me, my thumbs obeying even while my chest argued. "Kids safe with me at a church retreat. We'll talk tomorrow." 3 bubbles appeared, then vanished. The old predator in my head, the one that whispers when you're tired, said she was lining up a story. I put the phone face down and sat on my hands. At 11:17, Aisha texted, "Prosecutor on board. Drafting search for 7B tonight. Judge on call will review at 6 a.m. We'll be staged by 6:30. Harris. Soft perimeter only. No sirens, no press. If Holt is out, we bag paper and cameras. If he's in, we go hands clean and cuffs quick." I slept 2 hours in a chair with my shoes on, the way men sleep when they know morning is a door that opens hard. Dawn rubbed pink into the blinds. Sister Ruth handed me a biscuit that tasted like memory and a thermos I didn't deserve. We hugged the children, told them we'd be back before the second cartoon, and slipped out into a day that had already chosen sides. We met in a gravel lot 2 blocks from Unit 7B. Harris in a windbreaker that said police only if you wanted it to. Aisha in jeans and a blazer with her hair wrapped tight. Two plainclothes officers who had the quiet of men who keep their promises. The warrant was warm from the printer. Judge Whitaker's signature and neat river across the bottom. It limited the search to records, devices, and instrumentalities related to the transportation or false documentation of minors, financial records, communications, and media storage. And it authorized immediate seizure of any in-progress materials that fit that description. Harris briefed us tight. We knock and announce. If no answer, we use the master key provided by the landlord. He's briefed and off-site. If we encounter opposition, we withdraw and call in a marked unit. This stays clean. Ms. Monroe, you're here to identify scope, not to argue case law in a doorway. Aisha flashed a grin that said she had argued case law in worse doorways. Copy. And Mr. Carter, Harris said, meeting my eyes. You ride the bench today. I'll be 2 cars back, I said. I brought my eyes, not my hands. We rolled at 6:37. The strip of warehouses looked like any other. Roll-up doors, faded numbers, a smell of cardboard, and noon sweat even in the morning. Unit 7B's door was down. A small side-person door had a keypad lock. Harris knocked 3 times, voice steady. Police. Search warrant. Silence. He nodded to Officer Ruiz, who presented the landlord's key. The door opened with an officer's little sigh, not a criminal's drama. Inside, a rectangle of fluorescent hum, concrete, and order that made my back teeth grind. A reception table with a laptop and clipboard. 2 desks against a wall. A rolling metal rack with high-visibility vests. Beyond, separated by a security gate, we were now inside of the warehouse bay. Metal shelves, pallets, 3 work tables with paper cutters, lamination machines, heat sealers, and a ring light like the ones influencers use. The air smelled like toner, coffee, and something sweet jasmine. That tugged at a thread in my head. Clear. Ruiz called after a sweep. No bodies, no dogs. Just a place that did its wrong standing up. Aisha moved like a metronome. This table, she said, pointing to the cutters. And this one. A row of passport photos lay drying on mesh racks. Dozens of children who weren't mine. All with the same neutral expression. Same cropped jaws. Next to them, a stack of glossy 5x7s of family poses. Adults with 2 kids pasted into their arms. A cut line still visible on one where a small ear wasn't aligned. Harris photographed everything before he touched it. He read off labels like a radio man. Laptop 1, Dell Latitude serial. Tablet, Samsung A7. Phones, 3 cases off. External drives, 4, black, 1 terabyte. Printer, Zebra labeler. Laminator, standard. Officer James bagged and marked, chain of custody forming in ink and zip ties. Aisha opened a banker's box and hissed through her teeth. Travel kits, she said. Manila folders with a cover sheet. Parish logistics, family packet. Inside, forged notarized letters, school forms with blanks, photocopied birth certificates with names swapped, and a checklist. Photos, tickets, cash, meds, snacks. She held up one labeled with Friday's date. My name wasn't on it. My grandchildren's faces weren't either. But the template was a mold you could pour any child into. In a side office, Officer Ruiz found a whiteboard with columns. ACQ. Prep. Move. Paid. Under each, initials and dates. DH appeared twice as a proof. Under Friday, a green check we'd seen before. At the bottom corner, a note. Candler X2, Jenkins? Stacy okay? Print it all, Harris said, voice low. Even the lies. The jasmine smell came from a sweater draped over a chair. I stood in the doorway, hands in my pockets, and stared until the scent turned from memory to information. The same note that had floated out of Tiana's coat pocket when Mr. Jenkins opened the stitch. Aisha saw me seeing and didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Evidence has a way of matching your bones, even when your skin argues. James called from the back. We got a safe. Aisha lifted her bag and produced what looked like a spider's dream of cables. We can't crack that on site without throwing out the lock, she said. We log and remove. Photograph the dial, Harris said. Dust for prints. We'll seek a supplemental order if it's not already covered. He glanced at the warrant and nodded. It is. They found a ledger book, real paper, real pen, beneath a stack of shipping manifests. It wasn't poetry. It was cleaner. Dates, initials, amounts, merchant codes, line items like retainer. Bonus. Cleanup. Twice a line read, ST 1.5, which Aisha circled. If that's short for Stacy, she said. The .5 could be percentage. They bagged a box of IDs, some laminated, some halfway done. Georgia, Florida, South Carolina. A handful of Social Security cards so bad they were made to flash, not to keep. A shoebox of prepaid SIMs, rubber banded in tens. By 7:28, we were back in the cars with a trunk of ugliness and a drive full of proof. Harris radioed the precinct to log the seizure. Aisha texted the prosecutor. 7B was exactly what we thought, requesting same-day warrants for data on devices and the safe. We were 2 blocks away when a black SUV with a Go Dogs plate frame rolled into the complex, late by 20 minutes to a party already cleaned up. Harris eased us around the corner and watched in his mirror. A man got out thin, sweatshirt despite the heat, had pulled low. He paused at the door, saw the new evidence tape over the lock, and went still. He looked left, right, and then made the smallest decision a man like him ever makes. He got back in the car and didn't call. Professionals don't call from the scene. Savannah Hat, I said, almost to myself. Same as last night, Harris said, writing the plate down. We have him on video. We'll have him on paper by lunch. Back at the DA's office, the morning turned into motions and hard drives. Tech folks with calm hands began imaging the devices on an air-gapped station. Aisha drafted an addendum to include the whiteboard, the ledger, and the family packets. The prosecutor assigned a case number that made the mess official. Around 10, my phone lit up with a number I didn't know. I let go to voicemail. A text followed. Mr. Carter, this is Detective Ross with Child Exploitation Task Force. Captain Harris looped us in. We have resources for long-haul support, counseling for the children, relocation assistance if needed. I saved the contact. Help that arrives without speeches is the most useful kind. Tiana texted again. Are you with some lawyer? Are you trying to take my children from me? Marcus is poisoning you. I won't let you do this. I stared at the words until they blurred, then typed a line that measured out my mercy and my resolve. We'll talk today with counsel present. 3 p.m. at New Hope, Reverend Brooks' office. Aisha read over my shoulder and nodded. Good. Public place. Our ground. She'll either come alone for theater or bring someone for menace. Either way, we'll have 2 extra chairs and a recorder on. Do we tell her we know about Holt? I asked. We don't tell, Aisha said. We ask one question. Who is Darius? And we watch her eyes write the answer before her mouth finds a lie. Harris wrapped up a call and joined us. Airport liaison says the Friday booking was changed at 7:41 a.m., right after we left 7B. It now shows on hold pending document verification. Our alert tripped. They'll stall any check-in attempt with that PNR. Good, I said, because sometimes one syllable holds the weight of a church. At noon, I drove back to Decatur for lunch and a nap with my grandbabies. Layla drew a new house, triangle roof, square door, 2 stick figures taller than the others. She labeled them with wobbly letters, Daddy and GPA. Miles asked if we could have waffles for dinner. If heroes nap, I said. Granddaddies make waffles. At 2:40, I kissed their heads, told Sister Ruth I'd be back before sundown, and went to meet the woman who had set a match beside our lives and expected me to bless the light. I didn't know which version of Tiana would walk through Reverend Brooks' door, the one who laughed in my kitchen or the one who circled children's faces in red. I did know this. I had more than enough truth to sit up straight, and more than enough love to keep my voice from shaking. Tiana walked in smelling like jasmine and alibis. Reverend Brooks had set 2 extra chairs and a pitcher of water on the low table. Aisha clicked on a little recorder, so small it might have been a cough drop. Captain Harris stood by the bookshelf, jacket open. Nothing loud about him but the silence. Tiana came fast, chin high, hair wrapped in a scarf the color of money. She shut the door behind her like she owned the hinges. For a split second, she let her eyes fall soft on me. The same look she'd use handing me a pie on a Sunday. Then she saw Aisha and Harris and pasted on a different face. "Really?" she said. "Lawyers and cops? Earl, what are you doing?" "I'm choosing daylight," I said. "Sit down." She sat but didn't settle. Hands moved. Scarf adjusted. Slipped a palm across the table to the picture. Noticed the recorder. Pulled her hand back like the glass had teeth. Aisha kept her voice even. "This is a voluntary conversation. You can stop any time. We're recording for everyone's protection. We asked you here to address immediate safety concerns for Layla and Miles." "My children," she snapped. "Your victims or your responsibility," Aisha said. "Today we find out which." A flush crept up Tiana's neck. "I don't have to listen to this." "You don't," I said. "But you will. Because there are two little people who eat pancakes at my table who deserve better than your silence." I slid a photocopy across the table. The transfer receipt with the sea of zeros. "Found in your coat at Jenkins Cleaners." Her face didn't break, it stiffened. She didn't look down. "That's not mine." Aisha slid a second paper. A still frame from the print shop video. A woman in wig and ball cap pressing my grandbaby's photo against the glass. Just enough angle to show a thumb, with a scar near the base. Tiana's right hand, the one with a half-moon scar by the thumb, flattened on her knee. "We're going to ask you one question first," Aisha said. "Who is Darius?" Tiana's eyes flicked. Left to Harris, right to the door, back to me. And for a heartbeat the practiced lines fell, and I saw the math being done in her skull. What do they have? What did I leave? What can I sell? She settled on offended. "I don't know any Darius." Aisha pushed the tablet we'd cloned. Screen lit to a chat thread labeled cousin. The last message previewed, deliverables Friday. Airplane docks 90%. Need final parish prints. Tiana stared like letters could turn to smoke if she looked hard enough. "You stole my tablet." "Marcus retrieved family property for his children's safety," Aisha said. "We imaged it pursuant to a judge's order. There are backups. There always are." Harris stepped off the wall, calm as a deacon. "Miss Carter, I'm going to say this plain. There's enough right now to put cuffs on your wrists. We are choosing to listen first in case there's a sliver of you left that remembers mother is a holy word. It would be in that sliver's best interest to cooperate." Tiana swallowed. Her left knee started a small, relentless bounce. "You were at the print shop on Candler," I said. "You paid with a South Cross Logistics card. You signed Stacy. You scanned my baby's faces and circled them red." Her mouth opened, then shut. She tried again. "You think I'd hurt them?" "I think you already did," I said. "Every time you lied." "Darius." She caught her own tongue too late. I didn't let it pass. "There he is," I said softly. "Who is he?" She deflated a breath. Looked down at her own hands like they belonged to someone older than she thought she'd be by now. When she spoke, it wasn't the firebrand. It was a tired girl sitting in a poor light. "He's not. He's a client. He runs a company. I was helping with paperwork, that's all." He said it was. She groped for a word clean enough to carry, but dirty enough to admit. He said it was an adoption facilitation. He said the children would be safe. They go to families with money. They'd have better schools than Layla's, better doctors than Miles, better everything than you and Marcus ever gave them. An adoption with airline tickets under a false name? Aisha said, with forged school forms and a temp tag SUV picking up deliverables behind a warehouse with a laminator? That's not adoption. That's a market. Tiana's jaw trembled. Anger or fear? I couldn't tell. You don't know what it's like to count bills at midnight and realize the number doesn't get bigger no matter how often you count. You don't know what it's like to watch Marcus chase hours that never come home. I spent 30 years on a factory floor, I said softly. I know about numbers that don't stretch. I also know what it is to look at a child and decide what is not for sale. Her eyes flashed. Don't you dare. The phone in her bag buzzed against the chair leg, insistent. She jumped like she'd been called to the front of a class she didn't study for. She dug it out, looked at the screen, and the room got a little smaller. "DH," Aisha said, reading the initials upside down. Tiana hit decline, held the phone like it might sprout a blade. "It'll ring again," Harris said. "If you answer on speaker and let us hear the truth, that goes into a folder with your name on it that doesn't say principal defendant. If you walk out that door and we find you between us and him, you'll be stapled to his case number until retired, is the only word left on your mail." The phone buzzed. Tiana's throat worked. She tapped speaker and set it on the table like a hot pan. A man's voice filled the room, clear, businesslike, the kind of voice that never yells because it doesn't need to. "Stacy, you're late. We're moving the window up. Noon tomorrow, not Friday. Same plan. Where are the photo kits?" Tiana froze, eyes on me like I could translate the next words into something that didn't damn her. I'm finalizing prints," she said. "Had to adjust a file." "Do not freelance," the voice said, bored more than angry. The buyer moved his flight. "I don't reschedule money. Text me green when you have the kits. I'll have Calvin bring you the cash tonight. 10% now. Balance when we deliver." Harris wrote while the voice talked. Aisha barely blinked. I stared at the phone and felt something old and cold and sharp take a seat in my chest. "Darius," Aisha said when the call cut off, because names are bridges to rooms with doors. That was Darius Holt. Tiana covered her face. The scarf hid half of it. Her hands hid the rest. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Not at first. He said documents, that's all. He said families. He said nobody gets hurt. Men like that always say God is in their plan." Reverend Brooks said gently from the doorway. "I'd forgotten he was there, still as a pew. Prayer like weather in the room. They forget he reads fine print." "Where does Calvin meet you?" Harris asked. She looked at the door again. At me. At the recorder. She picked someplace between selfish and surrender. "Parking lot behind the old roller rink on Glenwood. 10 tonight. He drives the black SUV. He wears a Savannah hat like he can't take a hint." "We've seen him," Harris said. "You just put him in a net." Aisha slid a blank sheet across the table and a pen that wrote like butter. "You'll write that down as a statement," she said. "Time, place, names. You'll initial each line. You'll consent in writing to let us search your device and your residence. You'll call Calvin again at 8 and say the kits are ready and you want to do the handoff at the usual spot. You'll ask small talk questions that make men stupid. You still doing 7B? You still paying from South Cross, or you got a new card?" You'll keep him talking until he says something that makes a judge happy. Tiana stared at the pen, like signing meant choosing a planet. "If I do this, you start walking back from a cliff," Aisha said. "You don't fly, but you walk. And my children? Stay with me," I said. "Safe. Federal loved. That part never changes." She signed. Her mouth firmed when the letters of her name did what names do. Tie you to your choices. Harris took photos of each page, then bagged them like every other piece of truth on the table. He made a call to a team that doesn't use lights unless the sky begs. When she left, she turned at the door, eyes burning. "Earl," she said, "I'm not a monster." "I know," I said. "You're a mother who forgot the difference between more and enough." Remembering starts now. We didn't celebrate. We didn't condemn. We moved. Harris put a quiet arrest plan on Calvin. 2 cars, 1 block out, clean grab, impound the SUV, rapid warrant on his phone. Aisha wrote a supplemental affidavit, like the woman was paid by verbs. Reverend Brooks called Sister Ruth to say I'd be late, but the waffles would still happen. I texted Marcus. She flipped enough to set a hook. Do not contact her. At 6, Lionel and I picked up portable projector and a bag of frozen waffles big enough to feed a marching band. Back at the house, Layla climbed me like I was a front porch and told me she'd drawn a dog we didn't have yet. Miles announced that beans were traitors if they touched his waffles. I negotiated a peace accord, beans on a separate plate, and we ate like people who understand the sacredness of ordinary food. At 9:54, in a dark parking lot where a roller rink's letters had fallen until only OLO remained, a black SUV slid into view. The Savannah had stepped out. Calvin knocked ash off a cigarette he wasn't smoking and looked around without seeing anything. Tiana was in a car 2 spaces away, window cracked, phone on. Aisha's instructions rehearsed in her pulse. He walked to her door with a smirk like life had only ever said yes to him. He didn't see the 2 men who don't miss their train. He didn't see the captain until the badge and the barrel said hello. He didn't drop the envelope fast enough to convince anyone it wasn't heavy. They took him as if the night itself decided to fold him up and put him away. Harris texted one word: bagged. I put the kids to bed. I washed waffle syrup off a plate. I stood on a porch nobody knew was a safe house and looked at a moon that didn't care about our small wars. We weren't done. Noon tomorrow had moved up the enemy's clock and sharpened ours. But we had a voice on tape and a man in cuffs. We had a warehouse bared to light. And we had 2 children asleep under my roof, their breath a metronome that told me what mattered. They circled my grandbabies' faces in red. I circled the map around every man who thought there was a path and started erasing roads. Calvin's phone wasn't a device. It was a map with the labels left on. By midnight, Captain Harris had him in an interview room with a paper cup of water and a menu of choices. Aisha and I watched from a small observation space next door, a glass rectangle where you can see your own face layered over a man deciding who he'll be by morning. Calvin started with swagger. Y'all got me on a delivery. That's a misdemeanor with a haircut. He tapped his temple like he'd memorized a speech. You don't have me on what's inside any box. You don't have me in any room where deals. Harris didn't argue. He laid out photographs instead. The ledger page with Calvin bonus. A still of the black SUV at Unit 7BS dock. A zoom of the Go Dogs frame, and the text on Tiana's phone with his name in it. Then he set the oldest piece of police equipment on the table. Silence. Calvin's jaw worked. You could hear the arithmetic clacking inside him. He tried one more angle. I'm a driver. A cousin helps a cousin. You're a wedge, Harris said finally, between a man who buys people and the world that doesn't let him. You can either get pried out and discarded, or you can open the door. So we removed the hinge. Choose. It took 12 minutes. He chose. He asked for a lawyer. He got one. A public defender who knew how to catch a falling man with conditions. Calvin signed a proffer. Truth under penalty. Limited use of his words. 1 shot to put his fingerprints on a ladder instead of a shovel. Names came out. Some we knew, one we didn't. Darius moves out of the Lenox Towers, Calvin said. Penthouse level he ain't supposed to be able to afford. Uses a garage spot that belongs to a shell. He don't bring the boxes there. He meets at Unit 7B or at a Midtown Condos loading dock, Apex on Juniper. Buyer for tomorrow? Name I got is G. Navarro. Private flight out of PDK around 1. We were pushing noon because rich folk don't like to sweat. The kids never go through main TSA. Private terminal checks whoever they feel like checking. You got to show paper. But if it looks right, and you look like you belong, they wave you through. How many times? Aisha asked, voice level as a flat road. Calvin swallowed. More than I want to say out loud. Not every run is kids. Some are people who think they're workers with visas waiting. Some are just fake routes for money. But when it is kids, it's always a woman on the handoff. Looks less like a kidnap if a lady's smiling. Families don't hurt families, Darius likes to say. Calvin's voice went sour. He don't touch nothing heavy. He ain't picked up a box since I met him. Harris kept the questions moving. Where's G. Navarro sleep? Buckhead, I think. I never go that far. For tomorrow, he said, PDK Lounge 2. He's got a handler with him. Dude with a Rolex that blinds you on purpose. Phones, Aisha said. How does Darius talk to you? Signal and telegram, Calvin said. 2-step with throwaways. He likes voice notes. Thinks that keeps him safe. He never says names. He says kits. Deliverables. Escorts. He thinks he's cute. He ain't cute. The tech team started on Calvin's phone like surgeons. Airplane mode. Faraday sleeve. A forensic image spinning across a secured laptop. His contact list coughed up a handle that linked to Holt's known anonymous accounts. Voice notes were there, too. That bored, calm voice saying things like, "We move fast when the air is smooth," and "families are stickier than glue." It made my palms itch even with the glass between us. By 1:30, warrants were drafted for Lenox Towers and the Apex loading dock. A separate order went to the airport task force. Soft alert on the private terminal at PDK. Preserve manifest and camera footage for anything touching Navarro. The DA's office started a rack of sealed filings, meant to go public only after cuffs clicked. Aisha looked like she hadn't blinked in an hour. "We split the board," she said. "Team 1 serves Holt's residents with paper and light. Team 2 takes PDK with eyes and hands. We won't know which hole the rat runs to until he hears noise. We make sure there's no cheese anywhere." "What do you need from me?" I asked, because a man has to say it even when he knows the real answer. "Stay with the babies," she said. "Say yes to waffles. Say no to fear." I nodded. Sometimes the hardest assignments don't wear a badge. We got 3 hours of sleep each, feigned. The house in Decatur held its breath the way homes do when trouble paces on the porch. At breakfast, Layla put blueberries and a smile on her waffle and told me she was going to be a detective artist. Miles wanted to know if heroes wear socks. "Only on Wednesdays," I said, and he declared it a rule. Marcus called from a borrowed phone. I told him what I could say without fraying lines. That Tiana had agreed to help enough to get one man in a net, that noon was when our clock struck, that he should go to work and not vary his route because normalcy is a cloak when you need it. He breathed out like a man who's been underwater too long. "Pop," he said, "if I've got to testify, I will." I told him he already had, by staying steady. At 9:08, Harris texted from a staging point near Lenox. "Warrants signed. Teams in position. Building security cooperative." Aisha from the airport road. "PDK contact at private terminal is briefed. Lounge 2 under quiet watch. No media." She attached a map of the terminal, private gate, lounge area with leather chairs, a small security office, a separate door to the tarmac, where small jets pose like rich men's promises. "We won't spook the bird off the branch," she wrote. "We'll pluck it if it lands." By 10, tech had lifted enough from Holt's cloud to justify additional scope. Voice notes lined up with Calvin's memories. A calendar entry on Holt's phone read, in minimalist evil, "Lydia, 12p. Kit confirmed / GN 115. Lydia, Tiana's alias. GN G Navarro." My mouth went dry again. Evil is lazier than we think. It just relies on other people's fatigue. At 10:30, Aisha called. "We need you to do something simple and brave," she said. "We want to end this on our terms." Tiana has to finalize her role. At 11:15, she'll text Holgreen. At 11:25, she'll text Calvin the same. "You and I will be sitting 5 tables away at a cafe across from Lenox so she doesn't feel alone while she types. If Holt drifts by, I want eyes that know what they're seeing." "That's you." I didn't love it. I said yes anyway. Sister Ruth packed the kids a lunch and a lecture about washing hands, like you're auditioning for surgery. I kissed their heads, told them I'd be back before nap time, and went to put myself where a younger me would have told an older me not to. The cafe had metal chairs and a chalkboard menu. The city glinted expensive a block away. Tiana came in with sunglasses and nerves. Aisha put a latte in front of her like normalcy could be faked and nodded at the phone. At 11:15, Tiana typed green, hit send to a contact saved as a color, and stared at the 3 dots until they died. At 11:18, a voice note arrived. Aisha played it with the volume low, the sound curdling even in a whisper. "Proceed. Lenox Garage, Level 4C, Column 12, 1140. Calvin will drive." Aisha texted Harris. "Holt using Garage 4C, Column 12, 1140. He replied 2 words. "We're here." Tiana's hand shook. She clutched the cup with both like it was a life preserver. "Do I go?" she asked. "You go nowhere near," Aisha said. "You did your part. Now you stay visible with me in a public place where a camera and 3 witnesses can swear you were sipping latte while the bad men made bad decisions." Tiana's mouth pulled tight, then softened. She nodded once. I watched the street the way a man watches the horizon at sea. Calm surface, weather under it. At 11:36, a man in an elegant navy suit and a smile practiced in boardrooms slid out of the Lenox Tower's side door and crossed toward the garage like he owned the paint on the lines. Darius Holt didn't look left or right. Men who've been obeyed too long forget to check their mirrors. He disappeared into the concrete. Harris's text, "Holt on foot to 4C." 2 minutes later, Calvin's SUV approaching ramp, decoy only. Real team is in place. PDK team on ready. Aisha's phone buzzed with a simultaneous note from the airport. Navarro sighted entering lounge 2. 1 handler. No minors. No Lydia. I looked at Tiana. She did not look back. She was busy with her cup and the act of breathing. At 11:42, a man in a fitted blazer with a watch that caught the sun stepped into the cafe, crossed to the counter, and ordered without looking at the menu. He glanced across the room once, eyes flicking past us, then out to the street again like the world owed him a clear lane. His face meant nothing to me. It meant much to Aisha. She slid her phone across the table. On it, a still from a federal bulletin matched the jawline that had just bought an espresso. Gabriel Navarro, investigated in 2 countries for family placement irregularities. Never indicted. Rich enough to fly under clouds. "Stay still," Aisha murmured. "We've got him anchored on camera." We sat in the soft noise of a cafe where nobody knew a quiet war was being measured in minutes. At 11:50, Harris's text buzzed like a hymn. "Holt in custody. No incident. Laptop on person. 2 phones. Keys to 7B and Lenox unit. Going dark for transport." At the same moment, the airport message chimed. Navarro seated. Plane fueled. Waiting for family. Local units positioning. No arrest until Holt confirms. 10-minute window. We didn't pump our fists. We didn't pray loud. We breathed. At 11:53, Aisha typed a message on Tiana's phone with Tiana's reluctant blessing. Running 5 behind. Green is ready. Confirm PDK Lounge 2 at 12:05. A voice note came back that will haunt me happily for years because of where it led. Confirmed. Don't make me wait. We stood. We're done here. Aisha told Tiana. You go straight to the church. Reverend will walk you into a room with windows and tissues, and no more decisions for today. Your lawyer will meet you there later. If any number you don't recognize pings you, you don't answer. If any number you do recognize pings you, you still don't answer. Tiana nodded, relief and terror braided. She left with her scarf and her phone, and a silence I hoped she'd keep. I texted Sister Ruth that I'd be back within the hour and started walking. The sun was doing its best to pretend the world was only cars and dogs and people with bags. My phone vibrated once. Harris, Lenox secure. Holt flipped to anger, then to accounting. He'll try to talk his way out with vocabulary. We'll reply with evidence. A minute later, the airport chimed its clean, spare note. Detained Navarro at 12:06 in Lounge 2. Handler cuffed. No minors present. Passports with fraudulent photos seized. Plane grounded. The message included a photo of the lounge floor. 2 men face down on carpet that had seen better shoes. 4 officers with grips like truth. I stopped under a young tree, put my hand on the rough bark, and let my breath stack itself back into a rhythm I recognized. Noon had come and gone, and the men who put it on a calendar were the ones wearing the bracelets. At 12:22, I was back in Decatur with a projector under my arm. Layla cheered like she'd been promised fireworks. Miles asked if heroes could eat popcorn twice. Only if they share, I said, and he agreed to share like he'd invented generosity. We dimmed the little den, made a mountain of pillows, and watched a cartoon dragon learn the difference between treasure and trash. I put my hand on each small back and thanked the merciful ordinariness of a TV humming in a safe room. Outside, papers were being stamped and devices were being imaged, and men with thin smiles were learning how small a cell feels after you've lived in rooms with windows. Inside, we were 3 people and a tin of popcorn and a projector light painting a wall. The clock had moved up on us, and we'd moved faster. The circles someone drew around my grandchildren had not turned into routes. They had become exhibits. No trumpets sounded. The movie credits rolled. Miles fell asleep with a kernel in his hair. Layla whispered, "The dragon kept his friends." "Yes," I told her. "That's the only treasure worth guarding." They didn't just get arrested, they started talking. By evening, the city was a little quieter, like a storm had spent itself somewhere behind the skyline. Harris called me from a number he said I could store without fear. "Holt's doing what white-collar wolves do," he said. "He wants to negotiate with nouns. Cooperation. Proffer. Limited exposure." Navarro's handler already asked for the same menu. "We'll feed them paper." He paused. "You did good today, Earl." "I didn't do it alone," I said, and looked over at Layla and Miles building a fort under Sister Ruth's dining table with cushions that had seen better Sundays. Ordinary joy can make a man cry if he's been holding his breath too long. Aisha came by the safe house with a tote full of practical mercy. Kids' pajamas still warm from a dryer, 2 books with dog-eared edges, and a folder labeled simple words. "Age-appropriate scripts," she said, tapping the folder. "For when kids ask questions adults break on. You answer small and true, and you let the counselor carry the heavy." We sat at the little kitchen table, the one that had heard secrets before ours, and went through the next day like a checklist you could cook by. "Morning," Aisha said, ticking her pen. "Child advocate appointment at 9. Harris will have a victim specialist there. 10:30 forensic interview scheduling. Nothing invasive, just drawing, talking play. Noon, meeting with the DA to align charges. Afternoon, preliminary custody motion for Marcus. I'll file emergency temporary custody with supervised contact for Tiana, if and only if she stays on the path she started today." "You think she will?" I asked. "I think consequences are excellent teachers when pride runs out of chalk," Aisha said. "If she wavers, the record won't." I called Marcus from Lionel's faithful flip. He answered in a whisper from a break room. "Pop, tomorrow's your day to be a father on paper," I said. "Bring pay stubs, lease, any record that says stable. Wear the suit that hates humidity." He laughed, a small crack in stone. "I've still got it hanging from Aunt Aura's funeral. I'll steam it like it owes me money." We kept the kids' night simple: bath, 2 books, prayer with words we all knew by heart. When I turned off the lamp, Layla said, "Granddaddy, is Mommy in time out?" I pulled a chair close. "She's with some people who tell grown-ups when they've broken big rules," I said. "We're going to let those people do their job while we do ours. Sleep, eat, love." Layla weighed that, nodded like she was filing it, and curled around Rose the rag doll. From the other bed, Miles mumbled, "Waffles in the morning." "Waffles in the morning," I promised, because some vows should be kept with syrup. The morning came with promises to keep. The child advocate's office had walls painted in colors that calmed children and chairs that creaked under grandfathers. The specialist, Miss Tam, a soft-spoken woman whose eyes could hold storms without spilling, met the kids on the floor with crayons. She didn't ask questions. She asked to share. Layla drew a house with a roof, so large it was mostly sky. Miles drew a fire truck the size of a dragon. Ms. Tam nodded like they'd given testimony. "We'll keep that roof big," she told me quietly at the door. "And we'll make sure nobody sets fire trucks on fire." At the courthouse, Aisha walked Marcus through forms as if the law were a staircase, and she'd memorized each creak. Judge Whitaker heard the emergency motion in chambers. No drama, no audience. Harris summarized the danger in nouns and dates. Aisha threaded the facts into a rope. Marcus spoke 6 sentences that could hold a house. "They're my kids. My dad kept them safe. I can provide. I will provide." Whitaker signed the order like a woman who knows both how and why. Temporary sole custody to Marcus. Supervised contact for Tiana, as recommended by the advocate. No unauthorized pickups. No travel without court consent. It wasn't fireworks. It was a pen moving the world. Outside, Marcus leaned against the hallway wall and let a year fall off his shoulders. "Pop," he said. I didn't know paper could feel like air. I put a hand on his chest and felt the rhythm of a man remembering the beat. "Bring them home when the advocate says it's right," I told him. "Home can be two places for a little while, this house and yours. We'll make it one again without rushing what took time to break." Back at New Hope, the fellowship hall had been turned into a command center that smelled like coffee and good sense. Harris had a whiteboard of his own now, names, arrow states. Aisha stood beside him, translating arrows into motions. On a table, a box labeled 7B held the family packets we'd taken from the warehouse. I rested my hand on it as if touch could turn it into something else. "Updates," Harris said, tapping the board with his pen. "Navarro, charged federally. Attempted transport of minors with fraudulent documents, conspiracy. Holt, state and federal interest, racketeering, trafficking, money laundering. Calvin, cooperating, charged, but recommendation noted. Studio and print shop, witnesses. Payment processor, memos of thread in a larger sweater, feds pulling it." Aisha added, "We froze South Cross's operating accounts with an ex parte order. A trustee will audit disbursements. If we can show funds or proceeds, we seize. That money can pay for services, maybe restitution." "Restitution," I said, tasting the idea like a new spice. "Therapy, relocation, new locks, missed wages. It doesn't fix. It helps." Mr. Jenkins shuffled in, sweater on despite the Georgia sun, tea in hand like a prop that kept the world upright. He looked 10 hours more rested than the day before. "You move like a choir when the organ hits," he said, taking in the whiteboard. "May I?" he asked, and I nodded. He put his hand on the box marked 7B and whispered, "Not on my watch," like a curse and a prayer together. In the afternoon, the DA held a brief, closed meeting. No cameras, no rhetoric, just charges read in sentences that didn't shake. Aisha passed me a copy. It was a list long enough to make me tired. Conspiracy, trafficking, fraud, forgery, child endangerment. Against Holt, there was a line that made me smile without joy. Engaging in a pattern of criminal conduct. That's lawyer for, you did this like breathing. Tiana sat at the far end with a public defender and eyes that had learned to sit still. She'd spent the night at a safe address under a watch you don't see. Aisha had secured her a proffer. Testify, deliver documents, call names, and the DA would consider a plea that recognized both her crime and her cooperation. A mother can be both. The law had room to say so without lying. When it was over, she approached, small steps, hands empty. "Earl," she said, "I signed what they put in front of me." Her voice had lost its edges. "I will sit where they tell me and say what is true." She tried to meet my eyes and couldn't. "I am sorry," she said, the words so quiet a man could miss them if he wanted an easier day. "I believe you're sorry," I said. "I also believe that sorry is a down payment, not a deed." She nodded. Tears finding the path grief had already cut. Evening found us back at Sister Ruth's, the children building yet another fort, and Jenkins pretending to be a dragon because the part fit him better than fear. Reverend Brooks stopped by with aluminum pans of macaroni and greens and the kind of hug that reboots a soul. We ate at a table that seated more than plates. Gratitude, frustration, bone-deep weariness, and a little joy that showed up uninvited and stayed anyway. While dishes dried in racks older than me, Aisha's phone chirped with a federal area code. She listened, nodded, and covered the mouthpiece. "Feds are convening a grand jury next week," she said. "They want Jenkins for the chain of discovery, Calvin for the logistics, me for the paper trail, and," she looked at me, "you for the story, the human piece. Not drama. Truth. I'll say what happened," I said. "Plain." She gave me that small, fierce smile. That's the most dangerous kind. Marcus arrived with a duffel and the suit that hated humidity on a wire hanger. He knelt and hugged the children until the Ford leaned. Layla asked if he could stay the night. He looked at me. I looked at Sister Ruth. She said yes before we could barter. We made pallets on the floor like a campout. Miles fell asleep with one hand on a toy ambulance. the other on his father's sleeve. Later, when the kids were down and the house had the deep quiet of people who trust their breath again, Marcus and I sat on the porch steps and watched a moth flirt with the porch light. "I keep replaying it," he said, eyes on nothing. "All the nights I thought I was being unfair for asking questions. All the times I swallowed the itch. Second-guessing is a handsome liar," I said. "He shows up with perfect hindsight and no responsibility. We tell him to leave." He nodded, let the moth have the light, and leaned his shoulder into mine the way he did as a boy when lightning spooked him. "Thank you," he said. "Thank Mr. Jenkins. Thank Aisha and Harris. Thank a church with a basement and a woman who makes waffles in a storm." I said, "You can thank me by packing lunchboxes and tying shoes for the next 10 years. He grinned in the dark. Deal. The next morning was for small victories. Ms. Tam approved a gradual return to familiar routines, short visits to Marcus's apartment to reintroduce home, in measured doses, no overnights until the kids' sleep stayed even. The school sent a note welcoming the children back when ready. Ms. Hanley added a PS in her looping hand. We installed an additional check at the door. Nobody gets past me twice. At lunch, Harris swung by with news and barbecue. Holt's lawyers filed motions with Latin words, he said, and we replied with photographs. Navarro will try jurisdictional hopscotch. The feds like hopscotch. He wiped sauce from his chin. We also pulled CCTV from the Lennox garage for the last 60 days. Guess who meets Holt twice a week? He slid a photo across the table. A man in a tailored suit different from the one we'd seen. This one older, grayer, familiar in a way that made my stomach tighten. City councilman's aide, Harris said. It's not always monsters. Sometimes it's clerks with keys. We'll follow. He saw my face. We'll keep that thread out of your living room until it belongs in a courtroom. I believed him. Not because the world had suddenly become safe, but because good people had decided to do their jobs without the permission of fear. That night, Layla asked if she could draw a new family picture. She made 4 stick figures under a red roof again, but this time she added a 5th, a small shape between me and Marcus with a tiny square that might have been a briefcase. That's Ms. Shaw, she said, getting Aisha wrong and right at once. She wears brave shoes. Miles drew a giant badge next to a stick man with a hat and labeled it Cap. I put both pictures on Sister Ruth's fridge with magnets shaped like fruit and stood there longer than a man needs to, letting the cheap magnet hold up a heavy day. They once drew my grandbabies' faces inside red circles and called that a plan. Now the only circles I see are the ones the kids draw around the people who kept them here. And even though we still had rooms to sit in and questions to answer and nights where sleep would need persuasion, I could feel the story turning from fire to ash and ash to soil. The first visit wasn't a reunion. It was surgery with words. The child advocate scheduled it for Saturday morning in a room that looked like a preschool decided to practice kindness. Low chairs, soft blocks, a window painted with a sun that never sets. Miss Tam reviewed the rules with the gentleness of a nurse giving hard medicine. 20 minutes, 2 advocates present. Me in the room as the safe adult, Aisha observing. No secrets whispered, no promises made, no blaming words. I knelt by my grandbabies. We're going to see Mommy, I said. Grown-ups will be there to make sure everybody talks with love. Layla nodded like she'd been assigned a part in a play and meant to do it right. Miles said, Do they got juice? Miss Tam smiled. Yes, sir. Apple. Tiana entered with her hands open and her shoulders rounded. The jasmine scent smaller than before, like even the perfume was tired. She sat where Miss Tam pointed, no closer, no farther. The first 10 seconds were just breathing. Hi, Mama, Layla said, voice careful. She hugged Rose the rag doll instead of hugging her mother. Miles studied Tiana's face like it was a new toy he wasn't sure he could keep. Tiana swallowed. Hi, baby. Hi, little man. She didn't reach. She remembered the rules. I'm glad to see you. The words hung, true and insufficient. They talked about small things. Layla described a beanbag that eats you but you live. Miles announced waffles outrank pancakes. Tiana listened like a person at the window of her own life. She told one story, How Layla once fell asleep in a grocery cart at 2 and woke up laughing. Ms. Tam nodded to me when the air got tight. I said the line we'd practiced at Aisha's kitchen table. Right now, grown-ups are fixing big problems. While they fix, we visit with helpers. The helpers will say when we visit again. The room took that in and softened. When the 20 minutes ended, Tiana didn't plead or promise. She whispered, "I love you," to each child, and to my surprise, she didn't look at me to see if I'd pass it on. She'd learned something about doors that only open one way. When the advocate walked her out, Layla leaned into me, not crying, just heavier. "You did brave," I told them both. "That's enough." Monday started the other kind of brave. The grand jury room wasn't a stage, but those chairs could have hosted a choir. Aisha met me in the corridor with coffee and a squeeze to my elbow. "Plain truth," she said. "No embroidery." I told it like Mr. Jenkins' steam had lifted the words out of my pockets. The coat, the bag, the photo with angry circles, the bus, the safe room under the church, the print shop, the studio with stolen faces, Unit 7B with its laminators and lies. I didn't dramatize. I didn't minimize. I let the facts be their own witness. When the assistant U.S. attorney asked how I knew the circles meant possession, not love, I said, because love draws a circle around the whole child, not just the face. It makes room, it doesn't claim. A court reporter blinked fast at that and kept typing. Jenkins testified next, hat in hand, sweater on like armor. He told the Stitch story with a tailor's precision and a deacon's grief. Calvin followed in shackles and a fresh understanding of verbs. He didn't look at me. I didn't need him to. Afterward, Aisha exhaled like she'd been holding up a roof. "You did what the law can't. You gave it a heartbeat," she said. "Thank you. Thank the Lord for breath," I said and meant it. We didn't pause. Practical life reasserted itself. Ms. Tam approved a half-day return to school for Layla and Miles. "With parachutes," she said. Me at the drop-off. Marcus at pick-up. Ms. Hanley at the door, with a clipboard like a shield. I ironed tiny shirts like they were uniforms and packed lunchboxes heavier than sandwiches. At the school, parents' eyes did what eyes do. Widened, then looked away, then came back with something like sorry baked into nosy. Ms. Hanley flung the door wide, her smile an oath. "Welcome back, Carters," she said. "We don't count absences during storms." Layla marched in, chin high, a small general returning to her post. Miles showed his teacher his new rule about Wednesdays and socks. Small children kept small worlds, turning while big ones struggled to catch up. By noon I was in a hardware store with Marcus, choosing deadbolts and peepholes. The clerk handed over a kit with the solemnity of a sacrament. "Get the longer screws," he advised. "They bite deeper." We did. We put in a doorbell camera and changed passwords on everything from Wi-Fi to the Netflix nobody was watching. Marcus labeled a plastic file box children legal. He said it felt like breathing through his nose after weeks of mouth air. I knew what he meant. Money news came in like weather turning. Aisha texted that the court had granted a freeze and appointed a receiver to unwind South Cross sham. "Restitution fund likely," she wrote. "We'll move quick to secure therapy, locks, lost wages. It's not justice, it's groceries." I sent a prayer hands emoji because sometimes even an old man is out of words. Tiana kept to her lane. Under Aisha's supervision, she gave passwords, named contacts, identified a storage unit out by the Beltway where Holt kept swag boxes and paper you don't leave in a penthouse. None of it gave her back the keys to my kitchen, but each fact laid another board over a hole a child might fall through. The DA sketched an outline of a plea that included a felony, years that hurt, and an agreement to testify without theatrics. I didn't ask for more. Vengeance is a poor carpenter. It builds nothing people can live in. The papers started sniffing. A reporter left a card at Jenkins Cleaners with a note. "We're telling the story. We want to get it right." Harris took the call so Jenkins didn't have to. The piece that ran 2 days later didn't name the children. It didn't name our church. It named the crime, the scheme, and the arrests, and it put a hotline in bold at the bottom. Reverend Brooks read it in his office with the door half open, like he always does, and said, Sometimes light behaves itself. We saved a copy for a box labeled after. When Jenkins reopened, I brought lemon bars like I'd promised in a life that hadn't yet been broken. He put a hand over mine and said, "They still draw circles, Earl, good ones this time." He met the folks who had dropped off casseroles, bought extra starching, swept his front step, told him he'd done right. It made me want to put a second lock on his door and a third on his heart. Instead, I fixed the chain that had always stuck and oiled the bell that always squeaked. Midweek, Harris stopped by Sister Ruth's with brisket and breaking news. "That aide," he said, "the one with the tailored suits in the garage footage. He thought he was laundering favors. Turns out he laundered introductions. He's talking to internal affairs now with a humility he didn't come in with." He kept that thread out of our living room like he'd promised. That's good police work. Not just catching bad, but quarantining it so it doesn't sicken bystanders. The first night the kids slept in Marcus's apartment again, just a short, supervised stretch. Felt like a test you don't prepare for. You just take. We made spaghetti because sauce forgives mistakes, and read the same dragon book 3 times because repetition is a lullaby. Marcus tucked them in and then sat on the floor in the hallway for 20 minutes after, forehead on his knees, the way I used to do outside his door when he had croup and pride couldn't fix it. He asked me to stay over. I stretched out on the couch that complains when you shift. The apartment smelled like new paint over old years, a scent I've always loved. Around midnight, I walked the quiet rooms and touched what we'd made safer. New locks, camera's gentle eye, the file box thickening with orders and receipts. I stood at the window and watched the ordinary. A couple arguing about a movie. A man walking a dog that refused to use the one patch of grass it usually preferred. 2 teenagers laughing too loud. The world didn't know we'd stopped a plane. It didn't need to. It had its own small wars. Ours, for that hour, was at rest. In the morning, Layla drew a new picture for the fridge. A house with a red roof, taller trees, a badge, a briefcase, a cross, a heart. She drew 5 stick figures this time. Me, Marcus, herself, Miles, and somebody with a long skirt and a bun. "That's Sister Ruth," she said. "She makes waffles like church." She added a 6th, tiny. In the corner, circles for eyes, a straight line mouth. "That's Mommy. She's in timeout." She looked at me to see if that was allowed. I nodded. "She's learning," I said. "We all are." That night, in Sister Ruth's kitchen, we ate chicken and green beans and practiced our new ritual, gratitude for the ordinary. Harris texted a photo of evidence boxes stacked like bricks. Aisha sent a thumbs up and a note. "Holt arraignment Friday. We'll be there, but not with the kids. Judge set no contact order in stone." Jenkins called to say he was closing early because men twice his size kept coming in, shaking his hand and making him cry. They once drew my grandchildren's faces inside red circles and called that a plan. Now our circles were dinner tables, court orders, school doors, and hands held. The story had moved. Not finished. Stories with children never finish, but moving all the same. And for the first time since a tiny zip bag burned a hole in my jacket pocket, I slept a whole night. Not because nothing could happen, but because enough had. They didn't just face charges. They faced daylight with no sunglasses. Friday's arraignment felt like the city had opened a window and asked the truth to step inside. The courtroom was cool and fluorescent, the kind of light that doesn't flatter anybody. Aisha took the seat to my left, Harris to my right, their legal pads like shields. Marcus sat behind us in his humidity-hating suit, knees together, jaw set. We weren't here for spectacle. We were here to watch the system do what it promises on pamphlets. They brought Holton first. Tailored suit traded for county khaki, wrists cuffed low, chin still calibrated to boardroom angles. He scanned the room the way men scan balance sheets. Where's the risk? Where's the leverage? Where's the exit? He stopped on no one, like the rest of us were line items. Navarro wasn't here. He'd been moved to federal holding for his own set of questions, the kind asked with flags on the wall. State of Georgia versus Darius Holt. The clerk read, and 20 pages of charges stood up in a stack. The DA outlined the counts: trafficking, conspiracy, forgery, child endangerment, racketeering. Aisha leaned slightly toward me. Notice the order, she whispered. They stack intent first, machinery second. Holt's attorney was the type who smiles with his eyelids. Your Honor, he said smoothly. My client is a respected businessman with deep ties to this community. We ask for reasonable bond and electronic monitoring. He is not a flight risk. Harris wrote one word on his pad, laugh, and slid it toward me without showing his teeth. The DA didn't go theatrical. He went arithmetic. No bond, Your Honor. The defendant has access to significant resources via layered entities. He used those resources to plan the fraudulent transport of minors, and he cultivated government contacts for access. We have video, documents, devices, cooperating witnesses. He is the definition of sophisticated risk. Judge Whitaker didn't blink. Motion for bond is denied. Defendant is remanded. Any appeal on bail goes to a different calendar. This is not that day. She turned to the defense. Your client's ties are to money, not to people. Holt's jaw ticked once. For the first time, he looked not bored but inconvenienced. They let him out past a row of people who didn't owe him deference anymore. Outside, the sun made a liar of the courthouse lights. A reporter called my name, soft, not pressing. Aisha stepped forward. Mr. Carter won't be commenting. Please use the hotline in your story, not his doorstep. The reporter nodded, thankful to leave with something that wasn't a door slam. We didn't leave everything to paper. That afternoon, New Hope filled with the sound of chairs being dragged across tile. Reverend Brooks hosted a training with the Child Advocates team. Guard the lambs, the banner said in hand-painted strokes. Miss Tam explained, in words even tired men could hold, what grooming looks like when it wears family names. Aisha translated mandatory reporter into call me even if you're not sure. Harris walked through safety without paranoia. Pickup lists, code words at school doors. The kind of neighborhood watch that doesn't profile. It pays attention. Mr. Jenkins spoke last, voice low. If something tugs at your thread, pull it, he said. Better to unravel a sweater than to watch it strangle a child. Saturday mornings used to be for cartoons. Now they were for witness prep. The DA's victim specialist, Ms. Rivera, kind eyes behind steel frames, sat me, Jenkins, and Marcus at a table and taught us how to tell the story without letting the story own us. Describe what you saw, what you did, what changed, she said. Avoid absolutes and adjectives. Let the evidence sing. You provide the rhythm. She taught us how defense lawyers ask questions sideways. If someone tries to turn your yes into a maybe, bring it back to yes or no. We practiced out loud until the words stopped catching in the throat. Tiana kept walking her hard road. She sat in a windowless conference room with Aisha and 2 assistants from the DA's office and answered questions like a woman, holding her own hands to keep from floating off. Names, dates, how she met Holt, a networking breakfast at the Rotary. He called it social capital. How it accelerated. He said I had a talent for paperwork. He said families needed me. When she realized what she was part of, when the studio sent me the proofs with the children's faces swapped onto strangers' bodies. That's the night I turned on the shower, so the kids wouldn't hear me cry. She didn't ask for pity. She asked for a pen when the recorder misheard a name. Aisha made sure the record had commas in the right places and boundaries at the edges. At home, we built new muscles. Marcus started a calendar on the fridge with boxes big enough for Hope, therapy appointments, school library days, pasta W/extra sauce, movie night, no dragons, park if weather good. I took Layla to the Goodwill store and we picked out a lamp for her room shaped like a moon. She said it could hold the dark. Miles and I sat on the floor with a 1,000-piece puzzle we had no intention of finishing. We sorted edge pieces and called it victory. Harris dropped by with updates tucked inside a foil pan of ribs. Navarro tried jurisdiction hopscotch, he reported. But the feds love that game. He's detained without bond. His handler is hymning names to the grand jury. Men with watches learn the word cooperate fast when the clock stops. He nodded toward our living room where the kids were drawing. We're still digging in City Hall. That ain't. He's flipped. The councilman's office is reviewing compliance protocols. That's politics for, we're going to pretend we were asleep. We'll let internal affairs vacuum that rug. Do I need to testify about the aide? I asked. Not unless his path crosses yours, Harris said. Your job is to be a grandfather with excellent memory. The restitution fund trickled into a flow. A court officer called to confirm coverage for locks, cameras, lost hours at work, and 6 months of counseling for the children with Ms. Tam's team. Aisha added an unusual line item, aftercare for Mr. Jenkins. The law recognizes trauma, whether it wears a small backpack or a tape measure, she told the clerk. The clerk said, I'll push it through, in a voice that sounded like a person who'd learned how to move a machine without breaking it. School stitched itself back around the kids. Ms. Hanley instituted a new rule. 2 adults say yes or nobody goes, and the car line learned it like scripture. The resource officer added a second patrol at dismissal and a bucket of lollipops for VIPs, which turned the policy into a game the children wanted to win. Layla's teacher sent home a note. She is drawing again. Today she drew a big sun and labeled it ordinary. I stuck it on Sister Ruth's fridge with a magnet shaped like a peach. Sundays changed, too. Reverend Brooks asked all the grandfathers to stand while the choir hummed low. You hold more than coats, he said, eyes soft and fierce. You hold histories and futures. We're going to start a group, Saturday mornings, coffee thick enough to stand a spoon in, where men can talk about keeping watch without losing sleep. We called it the porch. First week there were 5 of us. Second week there were 12. We talked doors and daughters, bank accounts and Bible verses, how to ask our sons hard questions without making them into strangers. We laughed, too, the kind of laugh men used to keep from drowning. Arraignment turned into calendars. Holt pled not guilty with a face that didn't save him. His lawyer filed motions with Latin words none of us at the porch pretended to love. Aisha answered with exhibits and chain of custody logs. The judge set status conferences that felt like chess moves, slow, inevitable, dangerous if you got lazy. Navarro's case marched on a separate drum. Federal indictment, notices to victims, asset forfeiture petitions with signatures from people who pronounce every syllable in United States. The best news that week wasn't from a courtroom. It was from a kitchen table. Ms. Tam cleared the kids for gradual overnights at Marcus's place. 1 night a week for a month, then 2. Routines are the scaffolding around healing, she said. Keep them simple and the same. We made a ritual out of it. Friday pizza, homemade, lopsided. Bath with too many bubbles, 2 books, no exceptions. 1 song, the same one my wife used to sing. Nightlight on, door cracked 2 inches. Marcus sat on the hallway floor again, but this time he set a timer for 10 minutes and then went to do dishes, because healing also looks like rinsing plates when you'd rather stare at a door. Tiana asked for a second supervised visit. Ms. Tam allowed it. Same room, same sun painted on the window. This time she brought a small photo album of the kids at the zoo from when things were less tangled. She let them hold it. She didn't say, remember, like a command. She said, I like this one, and waited to see if they did too. When the 20 minutes ended, Layla hugged her, a quick, careful thing like a bridge being tested. Miles waved and announced, waffle still better, because some doctrines do not bend. That night, when the kids were asleep in Marcus's apartment, and I was back at Sister Ruth's folding towels like peace offerings, my phone buzzed. Aisha. Discovery from 7B shows a ledger line we missed. Donation to a youth charity. Likely laundering. We'll contact them gently. A minute later, Harris. We're serving a warrant on a storage unit at dawn. Calvin's directions matched Tiana's. No need for you to attend. Sleep. I did what men like me often don't, I obeyed. Dawn brought boxes, IDs half-made, passport photos, a portable laminator, envelopes pre-addressed to P.O. boxes that looked like air until you poured names in. Harris texted a photo of a whiteboard pulled from the storage unit. Pipeline review, Q3, with arrows and initials that prosecutors would later call a map of mind. Aisha wrote, this tightens the racketeering spiral. Fewer places for defense to argue isolated acts. None of that changed how many sandwiches needed making. I made them. Cut them on the diagonal because Layla said triangles taste better. On Friday, as the week closed its own ledger, Reverend Brooks invited us to the fellowship hall for spaghetti and testimony. Not the courtroom kind, the kind churches know how to hold. People stood and said small brave things. I called a hotline for my neighbor's kid. I changed the way we do checkouts at my daycare. I stopped telling my son to man up and started asking him to speak up. When it was my turn, I kept it quick. We thought circles could claim our babies, I said. Turns out the only circles that hold are arms, tables, and courts that remember what they're for. Folks murmured amen like thunder far off. They once circled my grandbabies' faces in red and tried to make that a future. This week we circled calendars, tables, and habits, and we made those the future instead. Nothing about it was cinematic. Everything about it was holy. And as I washed spaghetti sauce off a pan in Sister Ruth's sink with the window open to a quiet street, I realized the best part of daylight isn't how it exposes. It's how it lets you see where to sweep. Justice didn't arrive with sirens. It showed up in envelopes and calendars, and it asked for stamina, not applause. The weeks after arraignment were a grindstone. Aisha built binders like brick walls. Tabs for 7B, Candler, PDK, Lennox, storage unit, studio, payment processor. She handed me one slim folder of my own. Earl, statements and dates, and said, "We're going to make this so boring the defense can't find drama." Boring, I learned, is holy when it comes to protecting children. Marcus kept the home rhythm steady. Friday pizza, Saturday cartoons, Sunday church, Monday library. Layla's moon lamp held the dark. Miles enforced his sock on Wednesday doctrine like it was law. Ms. Tam added a new practice, feelings check-ins. Thumbs up, sideways, or down. We all did them at dinner. Some nights I went sideways for no reason but weather in my bones. Nobody tried to fix me. That's how you keep from cracking. You're allowed to creak. The first sentencing wasn't Holt's, it was Calvin's. He kept talking names, routes, how deliverables became family on paper. The DA kept their promise, asked the judge for mercy proportional to honesty. In court, Calvin looked smaller without the Savannah hat. The arrogance had washed out of his face and left a man who knew roads and regret. He said he was sorry. Not in that lazy way men say sorry to change the subject, but like an ache turning into a sentence. The judge handed him years, fewer than the book allowed, more than his mother would have prayed for. He nodded, as if relief and punishment could occupy the same chair. Maybe they can. Tiana's day came next. Aisha had negotiated a plea. One felony, cooperation locked in, a range that started in years and ended before my grandbabies were grown. The courtroom was quiet, like people understood that justice here was going to limp and still matter. Tiana stood straight, answered questions clear, accepted the count like a woman who'd run out of shortcuts. Before they let her away, she looked at me. I didn't raise a hand to her, and I didn't look away. That was the only honest blessing I had to give. Holt, of course, wanted a trial. Men like him believe juries are just a different kind of client. The state declined theater, no TV cameras, no speeches bigger than the facts. Aisha warned me that trials are marathons with surprise hills. Hydrate, she said, meaning more than water. We prepared like a team that respects the game. Ms. Rivera ran my cross with me until I could answer the same question 4 ways, without stepping out of the lane of truth. Mr. Carter, how do you know the circles meant harm? Because love circles the whole child, not the parts you can paste onto paperwork. Mr. Carter, did you ever see the defendant touch a child? I saw him build a machine that consumes children. Mr. Carter, are you angry? Yes. It hasn't broken my memory. Jenkins shook in the hallway before his day, then walked in like a man who knows needles and thread. He told the story of steam lifting stitches and a bag sliding out, and when the defense tried to make him sound nosy, he said, "I fix what puckers." The jury wrote that down with their faces. Harris and Aisha turned spreadsheets into sentences a bus driver could understand. The whiteboard from the storage unit. Pipeline review Q3. Hung on a screen like an x-ray of greed. My turn came on a Wednesday that smelled like rain. I wore my best suit. The one that fits tighter now that piece has made me a little soft around the middle again. I told it plain. The coat, the bag, the photo, the red circles, the bus, the safe room, the print shop, the studio that stapled stolen faces to strangers' bodies, the warehouse with laminators and lies, the airport lounge where men with clean fingernails waited for kids. I said the names with care and the dates like fence posts. The jurors watched like folks at a funeral who want to understand how the dead got there, so they can keep the living. The defense tried to make me angry enough to defend more than I'd seen. "Mr. Carter, you don't like my client." "I don't know your client," I said. "I know what he built." "Mr. Carter, you never saw him with your grandchildren." "I never want to," I said. "That's why I'm here." When I stepped down, my knees felt better than my pride. That's a good sign. It means you didn't perform, you testified. Outside the courtroom, life persisted in its ordinary assignments. The porch group added a thing we call the two-call rule. When a boy tells you something that knots your stomach, you make 2 calls. One to someone who can help, one to someone who will ask you tomorrow if you made the first. Accountability is cheaper than regret. Ms. Hanley at the school updated the pickup list process with color photos and a code word. Layla chose magnolia because the tree in Sister Ruth's yard had started blooming like it was showing off. Miles wanted waffle, but we told him code words don't get spoken in the car line. The restitution fund started paying for what trauma takes in quiet ways. Jenkins did 3 sessions with Ms. Tam's colleague and came back to the shop lighter, as if someone had finally helped him put down the bag he wasn't meant to carry past the counter. Marcus cut his hours by a sliver and took the kids to the park every Tuesday at 4. He calls them appointments with grass. I saw him sprint after soccer ball one afternoon and remembered his legs at 16. He wheezed after, just a little. I handed him water, and we didn't make jokes we'd both earned. There was a hiccup in week 3 of trial. A motion about the admissibility of some voice notes threatened to kick a rung out of our ladder. Aisha didn't panic. She pivoted. "We have redundant truth," she told the judge. The court allowed the notes with limiting instructions. It sounded fancy. It was simply fair. Navarro pled in federal court before Holt's verdict came. He took a deal that will see him count slow days in a place that's all doors and no windows. The press covered it with the right nouns: conspiracy, fraudulent documents, attempted transport of minors. They kept my grandbabies out of their sentences. I think whatever editor had a spine that morning. On a Saturday between testimony blocks, New Hope hosted a block party that doubled as a safety fair. No speeches, just cotton candy, a dance line that would embarrass purists, and a table where Ms. Tam's team handed out little cards that say, "It's okay to tell." Harris grilled hot dogs like a man who's seen too much and still knows how to make a child smile. Aisha lost a 3-legged race to Sister Delilah and wrote it off as jurisdictional disadvantage. Jenkins ran the lemonade stand and measured sugar like he measures hems, exact with love. Then came closing arguments. The DA didn't grandstand. He stacked bricks, car to print shop, studio edits, 7 BS laminators, storage units whiteboard, PDK's lounge, Holt's calendar with Lydia, 12P could confirm. He asked the jury for a simple thing: call a machine a machine. The defense tried to rename pieces: consultancy, paperwork solutions, family services, but the jurors had already seen the chassis. We waited. Jurors went into a room with a door that has made and unmade more nights than any other door in town. I took my folder and walked 3 laps around the block, hands behind my back like my father used to do when he was teaching himself patience. When the foreperson spoke, it wasn't cinematic. He stood. He read, "Guilty," landed like a hammer tapping a nail, clean twice, then 3 more times for the counts that need to echo. Holt looked surprised, which told me he'd been believing his own press releases. The judge set sentencing for 6 weeks out, enough time for pre-sentence reports and the defense to write letters that could not turn back a tide. We didn't cheer. We exhaled. Aisha gripped my forearm the way soldiers clasp on bridges. Harris nodded once, the nod of a man who knows there's always another case, but allows himself this one breath. After, We went to Sister Ruth's and ate stew that tasted like somebody's grandmother remembered all the tricks. The kids painted rocks in the yard, hearts, suns, a lopsided badge. Layla handed me one she'd written on, in shaky block letters, safe. I put it on the windowsill over the sink, where I can see it every morning when the kettle starts to sing. Tiana heard about the verdict in a place with bars. She wrote a letter, 2 pages, neat, not asking for absolution. I am learning the difference between hard and wrong, she wrote. I don't know what the arc of her repentance will look like. I do know my grandchildren's arc, just bent a little more toward ordinary, the most radical destination we have. We still had sentencing to face, and the long tail of lawsuits, and the slow work of teaching our bodies they no longer needed to brace at every knock. But the red circle someone drew to claim my grandbabies had been redrawn into something else: juror badges, court seals, porch groups, school code words, a rock on a windowsill. That's how you win back a life. Not with one victory, but with 100 small circles that hold. Victory in court is never the end. It's only the clearing of a path. And once the dust settled on Holt's guilty verdict, the real work began. The work of repairing lives, rewriting routines, and making sure no shadow lingered where children lay their heads. The morning after the verdict, I woke before dawn. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the old fridge and the steady breathing of Miles and Layla in the next room. I made coffee, sat at the table, and looked at the rock Layla had painted for me safe. The letters were uneven, but they glowed in the early light like scripture. For the first time in months, I believed them. Not completely, not yet, but enough to sip my coffee without checking the locks twice. Marcus arrived around 8, his tie askew, eyes weary but steady. He set his briefcase down and rubbed his temples. Sentencing's in 6 weeks, he reminded me. The DA wants impact statements. I'll write mine, I said, voice rough. But it won't be about Holt. It'll be about them. I gestured toward the room where the children were stirring awake. What they deserve. What he almost took. Marcus nodded. That's what the jury heard in your testimony. It's what they'll hear again. We spent that day as ordinary as we could manage. Pancakes for breakfast, burnt edges on mine, perfect golden circles for Marcus. The kids squabbled over syrup. Layla won the last blueberry with the kind of cunning that'll serve her in boardrooms or battle someday. Miles sulked until Marcus pulled him onto his lap and tickled him until he howled with laughter. Ordinary. Sacred. But outside our door, the system kept grinding. Aisha called midweek with an update. Defense is preparing mitigation. Letters from business partners, clergy, even a senator's aide. They'll paint Holt as a benefactor, a misunderstood philanthropist. I barked a laugh. Benefactor of what? Broken families. That's why your statement matters, she said softly. Not vengeance, truth. Judges remember truth more than adjectives. At the same time, Harris worked another angle. There's money frozen, accounts tied to Holt and Navarro. We're pushing to direct a chunk into a permanent fund for at-risk kids. If the state plays ball, your grandbabies won't just be survivors. They'll be the reason other kids don't fall through cracks. That night, I wrote by hand, because some truths can't be typed. To the court, these children are not line items. They are not initials on a whiteboard. They are not merchandise. They are Miles and Layla, 7 and 4 years old. They laugh too loud at knock-knock jokes. They draw suns bigger than the sky. They sleep with a lamp shaped like the moon because darkness still makes them tremble. They survived a plan designed by men who thought of them as cargo. I want the court to remember their names, not the defendants' titles. I want the sentence to say to them, and to anyone watching, that children are not for sale, not for schemes, not for silence. I sealed it in an envelope and slid it under Marcus's case files. He read it quietly, then placed his hand over mine. No words, just wait. Life went on in small, necessary increments. The porch men's group grew to 20. We sat in a circle of folding chairs, sipping bitter coffee, talking about what vigilance looks like when you don't want paranoia to poison your home. One man admitted he never trusted babysitters again. Another said he'd started volunteering at his granddaughter's school, just to be present. We weren't experts, but we were guardians in training. At school, Ms. Hanley hung a new banner in the hallway. Every child is somebody's universe. Layla drew a picture of it in crayon and taped it to our fridge. Miles added a smiley face sticker over the word universe. He said it looked like a planet with a grin. The community didn't forget, either. Reverend Brooks organized a second Guard the Lambs fair. This time, the turnout doubled. There were booths for safe tech use, parenting workshops, and free counseling signups. Jenkins spoke again, his voice steadier. "A stitch missed becomes a tear," he told the crowd. "Don't let your silence be that missed stitch." Folks nodded like he dropped a psalm. But not every day was triumph. Some nights, Miles woke screaming, convinced a man in a suit was at the window. Layla started hoarding little trinkets under her bed, erasers, bottle caps, old keys, as if she needed proof she could keep what was hers. Ms. Tam said it was part of their brains trying to control what had once been out of their hands. We didn't scold. We held them tighter. Then came the day Aisha warned us about, Navarro's cooperation hearing. Federal court, different building, but the same ghosts. He sat in chains, face pale, reciting names and dates like a man who finally realized memory was currency. He admitted to funding fake charities, to brokering transfers, to laundering money through Holt's consultancy. Every word he spoke tightened the noose around Holt's neck. Still, listening to him was like swallowing glass. Afterward, Harris muttered, "That man's ledger had your grandkids penciled in. Don't ever forget that." I never will. In the weeks leading up to sentencing, Layla's school assigned a project. Write about your hero. She sat at the kitchen table with her pencil, tongue poking out in concentration. When she handed me the paper, my throat closed. My hero is my Grandpa Earl. He makes pancakes even if they burn. He sits in the hallway when I'm scared. He says safe like it's magic. He is my sun and my moon. I folded it gently, slipped it into my Bible, and knew right then what my statement in court had to carry. Not just the weight of justice, but the sound of her belief. The night before sentencing, I stood on the porch under Sister Ruth's magnolia tree. The air was thick with blossoms, their perfume too sweet to ignore. Marcus joined me, hands in his pockets. "You ready for tomorrow?" he asked. "No," I said honestly, "but I'll stand." He looked out at the street, quiet under the streetlight glow. "That's all we've done, isn't it? Stand." And maybe that was the lesson buried under months of fear and testimony and binders of evidence. Evil schemes move in silence, in shadows, in unchecked corners. But ordinary people, even old men with tired bones, can stand. And standing, it turns out, is sometimes enough to bring the whole thing down. The next morning, we would walk back into court, not as victims or witnesses, but as family, ready to face Holt's last play, and to hear a judge declare what price his empire of lies would finally cost. The courthouse smelled of polish and nerves. Sentencing day. Holt sat at the defense table, khaki jumpsuit pressed as if dignity could be ironed back into fabric. His lawyer had stacked letters of support in neat piles, all for men and women who'd never smelled the rot behind his empire. The gallery buzzed low, neighbors, reporters, church members, a few strangers who had followed the case like a headline serial. I clutched my folder. Inside, my statement, written in careful script. Marcus squeezed my shoulder as we waited for the judge to enter. "Steady, Dad," he whispered. "Just speak their names." The bailiff called for order. Judge Whitaker stepped in, robe heavy but expression clear. She had seen every kind of scheme walk through her doors, but I swear her eyes softened when they landed on Miles and Layla, sitting with Ms. Rivera in the front row. "Mr. Holt," she began, voice steady. "This proceeding concerns sentencing after conviction by jury. The court has reviewed the pre-sentence report, letters submitted by defense, and victim impact statements. We will hear from counsel, then from victims' representatives." The defense lawyer rose first, words smooth as glass. "Your Honor, my client has served his community for decades, employing hundreds, donating to schools, contributing to civic programs. His downfall, though grave, should not eclipse a lifetime of generosity. We request leniency, consideration of his health, his family, and his record of philanthropy." I almost laughed, but anger beat me to it. Generosity? His so-called donations were just camouflage for a machine that tried to consume children. The prosecutor spoke next. Your Honor, this is not about philanthropy. This is about predation disguised as enterprise. Mr. Holt orchestrated a network that treated minors as commodities. He laundered money through fake charities, groomed accomplices, and nearly succeeded in transferring children across state lines for sale. The jury's verdict reflects overwhelming evidence. We asked the court to impose the maximum sentence under statute. Anything less would diminish the harm done and endanger public trust. Then came the moment. Mr. Carter, Judge Whitaker said, would you like to address the court? My legs felt like they belonged to someone else as I walked to the podium. The paper shook in my hands. But when I looked at Layla and Miles, my son, my moon, the words steadied. Your Honor, I began. I'm not here to speak about Mr. Holt's reputation or his health. I'm here to speak about two children, Miles and Layla, 7 and 4 years old. They're like pancakes, puzzles, and knock-knock jokes. They sleep with a nightlight because darkness makes them remember things they shouldn't know at their age. These children were marked, their faces circled in red on a photograph like targets. Their names entered into ledgers like inventory. Mr. Holt didn't just threaten their safety. He threatened their right to grow up believing the world is kind. When I tuck them in, they ask if men in suits will come back. When I walk them to school, they check the code word at the gate. Their innocence was stolen, even if their bodies were spared. And that theft will echo for years. I ask this court not for vengeance, but for truth in the record. Let the sentence say plainly, children are not merchandise. Families are not ledgers. And no man's wealth, status, or connections can buy exemption from accountability. I paused, swallowed hard. Your Honor, please remember their names when you impose sentence. Miles and Layla. That's all. When I turned back, Layla's eyes glistened. Miles clutched his dinosaur toy like it was armor. Ms. Rivera wrapped her arms around them both. Judge Whitaker nodded. Thank you, Mr. Carter. Then came the silence, the heavy kind, before a bell tolls. Mr. Holt, the judge said, gaze fixed. You present yourself as a benefactor, but evidence shows you built an enterprise that commodified children. That is an abomination, regardless of your wealth or connections. The law provides a range. The court finds the maximum appropriate. On each count, racketeering, conspiracy, trafficking attempt, you are sentenced consecutively, totaling 110 years in state custody. You will serve without parole eligibility for the first 70. The gallery gasped. Holt's lawyer slumped. Holt himself sat frozen, jaw tight, as if disbelief could undo the words. But disbelief has no gavel. Judge Whitaker continued. Furthermore, the court orders restitution from seized assets to fund child protection programs statewide. This includes counseling, school safety initiatives, and survivor support. Children will live because of the money you meant for exploitation. My chest burned, not with triumph, but with release. For the first time since that day in Jenkins's shop, I felt something unclench inside me. Holt was let out in cuffs, eyes darting, searching for loyalty in a room that had none left for him. Navarro's sentencing would follow in federal court, but his fate was already sealed. Outside, reporters crowded, microphones thrust forward. Aisha stepped ahead, voice firm. The Carter family asks for privacy. What matters today is not Mr. Holt's downfall. It is the safety of children across this state. Please direct questions to the DA's office. We walked to the steps. Layla tugged my sleeve. Grandpa, is it over? I crouched to her level. The court part is over, baby. But healing takes longer, and we'll do it together. Miles frowned. So Holt goes to timeout forever? I managed a smile. Yes, son. Forever. That night, back at Sister Ruth's, the whole house smelled of stew and cornbread. Neighbors brought pies, casseroles, hugs that lasted too long. The porch men showed up with folding chairs, filled the living room, prayed over us like we were kin. Marcus held his children close, eyes finally softer than I'd seen in months. I sat on the porch under the magnolia tree, Layla curled against my side, Miles asleep across my lap. The moon lamp glowed faintly through the window. We had faced the monster in daylight, and those scars remained. The sentence carved a new truth into stone. They are safe. Tomorrow, we would wake and still have to live it out. Therapy sessions, new schools, learning to laugh without looking over our shoulders. But tonight, in the quiet after the storm, I let myself breathe. Safe. The word no longer felt fragile. It felt earned. 6 months later, the world had found its rhythm again. Not perfect, not painless, but steady. Like a heart that had once skipped and now beat strong enough to carry a family forward. Holt was gone from headlines, buried in a sentence so long it could outlive memory. Navarro, too, had disappeared into a federal system that doesn't trade mercy for money. The courts kept their promises, but what mattered more was what happened in kitchens, classrooms, and pews after the gavel fell. Marcus's apartment had become home and full. The moon lamp glowed on Layla's dresser. Miles had a shelf crowded with dinosaurs, each one given a name and personality. Every Friday was still pizza night, with toppings chosen in a rotation that caused more sibling debates than any courtroom ever could. Saturdays were for library trips and park visits. Sundays, they sat in the second pew at New Hope, Marcus's arm around both children, while they colored in bulletins. I stayed often, sometimes on the couch, sometimes on the floor with a quilt. Always close enough to answer when nightmares crept in. But the nightmares came less often now. Miles had stopped asking if men in suits were at the window. Layla had stopped hoarding trinkets under her bed. Healing didn't erase scars, but it made them manageable, smaller than love. The Porch Men's group had grown beyond what Reverend Brooks imagined. Every Saturday, 25 or 30 of us sat in folding chairs with bitter coffee, swapping stories about our children and grandchildren. We learned how to spot grooming online, how to report suspicious strangers without shame, how to be guardians without drowning in fear. Sometimes we just laughed at our own fumbling, burnt pancakes, forgotten soccer cleats, bedtime songs sung off-key. Jenkins always closed the morning with the same words: "Hold steady. Children, watch how we stand." Speaking of Jenkins, his shop was thriving again. Folks came not only for alterations, but for counsel, for a story, for the sight of a man who had pulled one loose thread and unraveled a whole criminal empire. He still carried his tape measure around his neck like a medal. On his counter sat a photo of Layla and Miles, framed in wood, with one word beneath it: safe. Tiana was serving her sentence. She wrote letters sometimes, always careful, never asking for forgiveness she hadn't earned. One arrived in early spring. "Dear Daddy, I know you may not want to read this, but I hope you will. I spend my days working in the library here, shelving books, teaching some of the women to read better. I think about Miles and Layla every day. I think about the hurt I caused, and the hands I let guide me when I should have walked away. I will never excuse it. I am trying to become someone who can someday deserve to stand in the same room with them again, not as a mother with rights, but as a woman with truth. Thank you for keeping them safe. That is love. I see that now." I read it twice, then folded it into my Bible. I couldn't answer. Not yet. Maybe someday. The restitution fund did more than I had expected. Schools received grants for secure entry systems. Churches hosted workshops on digital safety. Counseling services expanded. And yes, Marcus's family was supported too. Not to erase the past, but to make the present livable. Therapy sessions were paid for, lost wages replaced, locks changed, and a trust fund established for the children's education. Holt's stolen money had become seeds for futures he could never touch. Summer brought laughter back. We went to the pool, to the park, to a small zoo on the edge of town. Layla rode the carousel 5 times in a row, hair flying, eyes bright. Miles carried a plastic sword from the gift shop and declared himself a knight. Watching them, I felt the circle widen, not the red circle of threat, but the unbroken circle of family, community, faith. One evening, as fireflies blinked in the yard, Marcus and I sat on the porch. The kids chased each other barefoot through the grass. Sister Ruth rocked beside us, humming a hymn. Marcus spoke first. "I used to think justice would feel like fireworks," he said, "but it feels more like this. Kids laughing in the yard, bills paid, lock strong, a community that doesn't look away." I nodded. Fireworks fade. This lasts. He turned to me, his voice quiet. You saved them, Pop. I shook my head. We saved them. Jenkins with his steam. Aisha with her law. Harris with his grit. Miss Tam with her crayons. Reverend with his prayers. A whole army. I just carried a bag and didn't look away. That was enough, Marcus said. I watched the children, their shadows long against the grass, and thought of the rock on my windowsill safe. Layla had painted it, but it belonged to all of us, to every hand that refused to let evil draw the last circle. When the stars came out, I whispered a prayer. Not a dramatic one, just a simple thanks, for laughter, for ordinary nights, for the kind of justice that builds rather than destroys. Evil had tried to claim them with red ink. We answered with stronger circles, arms, tables, courts, prayers, and a future. And as Miles collapsed into Marcus's lap, giggling, and Layla curled against Sister Ruth, I felt it settle inside me. Not just relief, not just peace, but purpose. My work wasn't finished. None of ours was. But the story had bent toward life, and that was enough to let me rest. For the first time, I believed not only that they were safe, but that they would stay safe.